Welcome to a story of survival, power, and the woman who rewrote every rule they tried to break her with. If you love tales of underdogs rising against impossible odds, of marriages that begin as war and end as legend, then you're in exactly the right place. Stay until the very end to see how a girl they called worthless became the woman even a duke couldn't control. Don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Now, let's begin. The ballroom glittered like a jewel box tipped on its side, spilling light and laughter across marble floors that cost more than Eliza Whitmore's entire future. She stood against the far wall, wedged between a potted fern and a curtain that smelled faintly of mildew, watching the dancers spin past in clouds of silk and self-satisfaction. Nobody looked at her. They never did. Eliza had perfected the art of being furniture. It was easier that way, safer. When you were 23 and unmarried in a world that wrote you off at 19, when your father drank away what little remained of the family name, and your mother spent her days cataloging everything you'd failed to become, invisibility wasn't just a defense, it was survival. "Did you see Lady Catherine's emeralds?" A voice drifted past, high and sharp. "Absolutely vulgar. New money always is." "Better new money than no money," another voice laced with venom disguised as sympathy. Poor Eliza Whitmore. Still here season after season. I heard her mother's taken to telling people she's delicate, as if that's more respectable than desperate. Eliza's fingers tightened on her champagne glass. She didn't turn, didn't react. That was the other thing she'd learned. They only kept talking if they thought you couldn't hear, and sometimes, buried in their cruelty, there were useful truths. She won't find anyone now, not with the whispers about her father's debts. I heard Lord Pemberton himself turn down the introduction. Can you imagine? Her mother practically threw her at him. The voices faded into the orchestra's swell, leaving Eliza alone with the taste of humiliation she'd grown too familiar with. She counted the candles in the chandelier overhead. 47. She'd counted them last week, too, at the Ashford ball, and the week before that, at the Hastings soiree. Same candles, same people, same future stretching ahead like a prison sentence. Her mother would be somewhere in the card room by now, playing at respectability with women who tolerated her presence but never invited her anywhere that mattered. Her father wouldn't have come at all. He rarely did anymore. Easier to drink at home than face the looks, the whispers, the way old friends suddenly remembered pressing engagements when Thomas Whitmore entered a room. The Whitmore name had once meant something. Eliza barely remembered those days. She'd been a child when her father made the investments that ruined them, trusting the wrong man with the wrong venture. The money had vanished. The friends had followed. All that remained was the house, mortgaged to the roof, and the pretense that they still belonged in rooms like this. "Smile, dear. You look like you're attending a funeral." Eliza turned. Her mother had materialized beside her, face carefully composed, eyes scanning the crowd with the intensity of a general surveying a battlefield. "Perhaps I am," Eliza said quietly. "Don't be dramatic. It's unbecoming." Margaret Whitmore's fingers dug into Eliza's arm, the pressure just shy of painful. "Lord Ashford's nephew is here, the one from Scotland. I heard he's looking for a wife. I heard he's 60 and looking for a nurse. Beggars can't afford to be particular." The words landed like a slap. Not because they were cruel, Eliza had heard worse from her mother, but because they were true. That was the thing about their situation. The truth of it sat in every room they entered, an unwelcome guest everyone pretended not to see. "I'm going to get some air," Eliza said. "You'll do no such thing. If you're seen wandering the gardens alone, people will talk." "They already talk." "Yes, but we don't give them fresh material." Her mother's grip tightened. "You will stay here. You will smile. And if anyone with a title and a pulse shows the slightest interest, you will be charming if it kills you." It might, Eliza thought, death by charm. At least it would be quick. Her mother released her arm and swept back into the crowd, a ship sailing toward some new social conquest that would inevitably end in polite rejection. Eliza watched her go, feeling something cold and heavy settle in her chest. This was her life. This endless parade of borrowed gowns and forced smiles, of standing in corners while other girls, younger, prettier, richer girls, claimed the futures that should have been possibilities for her too. The orchestra shifted into a waltz. Couples flowed onto the floor like water finding its level, each pair perfectly matched, perfectly appropriate. Eliza recognized most of them. Diana Fairfax with Lord Somerset. Everyone said they'd announce the engagement by month's end. Caroline Hunt spinning past with the youngest Ashford boy. Even plain Mary Winters had found someone, a baron's second son with kind eyes and a patient smile. Everyone found someone. Everyone but Eliza. Pathetic, isn't it? The voice came from her left, low and rough-edged. Eliza turned, startled to find she was no longer alone in her corner. A man stood there, half hidden by the curtain, watching the dancers with an expression that might have been amusement or contempt. Possibly both. She'd never seen him before. She would have remembered. He was tall, dark-haired, with the kind of face that seemed carved rather than born, all sharp angles and hard lines, as if someone had set out to create the precise opposite of charm and succeeded brilliantly. His clothes were expensive, perfectly tailored, but he wore them with the casual indifference of someone who'd never had to think about whether he belonged anywhere. "Excuse me?" Eliza said. "The mating ritual." He gestured vaguely toward the dance floor. "All this performance. The preening and posturing. At least animals have the honesty to fight for what they want." "Perhaps you're attending the wrong parties." His mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile. "Perhaps I'm attending the only parties there are." There was something unsettling about him. Not threatening, exactly, but off somehow. Like a predator that had wandered into a room full of prey and couldn't quite remember why it had bothered. His eyes were dark, almost black in the candlelight, and they held an intelligence that made Eliza instinctively want to step back. She didn't. Pride or stupidity, or maybe just exhaustion with being afraid. "I don't believe we've been introduced," she said. "No, we haven't." He paused. "You're the invisible one." The words hit harder than they should have. Eliza felt her face flush. "I beg your pardon?" "The girl in the corner. The one everyone talks about but nobody talks to." He tilted his head, studying her with uncomfortable directness. "Eliza Whitmore. Daughter of the drunk and the desperate. 23 years old, no prospects, no fortune, no future." "Who the hell are you?" The words came out sharper than intended, loud enough that a nearby couple glanced over with raised eyebrows. "Dominic Hale." He said it flatly, as if the name meant nothing, as if he didn't notice the way those words changed the air in the room. But Eliza noticed. Everyone noticed. The Duke of Ashenhurst didn't attend social functions. He didn't dance, didn't marry, didn't play the games that kept society spinning. He was a ghost story mothers told to frighten ambitious daughters, the man too powerful to need anyone, too ruthless to want them. People said he'd destroyed 3 competitors in business and buried the evidence so deep nobody could prove it. They said he'd refused the Queen's personal invitation to her jubilee. They said his own family feared him, that his younger sister had fled to the continent rather than live under his roof. They said a lot of things, none of them good. "You're staring," he said. "You just recited my entire tragic history. I think I'm entitled to stare." "Fair enough." He glanced toward the ballroom. "Your mother's coming back. She's brought reinforcements." Eliza followed his gaze. Her mother was indeed approaching, dragging an elderly gentleman in tow, Lord Ashford's nephew, presumably, the 60-year-old nurse-seeker. He looked every day of it, with watery eyes and a pronounced limp. "I should," Eliza began. "Dance with me," Dominic said. She blinked. "What?" "Dance with me." He extended his hand, not quite touching her, his expression unreadable. "Unless you'd prefer Lord Ashford's nephew. I hear he's very experienced." "I don't even know you." "You know my name. You know my reputation. That's more than most people know about their partners." His hand remained steady. "Consider it an experiment. 5 minutes of your evening in exchange for avoiding that conversation." Eliza looked at his hand, at her mother's determined advance, at the nephew, who was squinting in her direction like she was a particularly complicated menu item. "One dance," she said. His fingers closed around hers. They were warm, calloused in unexpected places, not the hands of a gentleman who'd never worked. He led her onto the floor with the same casual command he'd used to dissect her life story, as if her agreement had been inevitable, her resistance a formality he'd already calculated past. The music swelled. His hand found her waist. They began to move. "You dance well," Eliza said, because the silence felt dangerous. "I do most things well." "It's tedious." "Must be a terrible burden." "You have no idea." He guided her through a turn with mechanical precision. "Tell me something true." "I'm sorry?" "Something true. Not the polite lies we tell at parties, not the performance, something real." Eliza's mind went blank. What kind of question was that? What kind of man asked that of a stranger while waltzing in a room full of people who'd crucify her for saying the wrong thing? "I don't know you well enough for truth," she said carefully. "That's when truth is easiest. We'll never see each other again after tonight. What do you have to lose?" Everything, she thought. But he was right about one thing. They wouldn't see each other again. Men like Dominic Hale didn't frequent the same circles as families like hers. This dance was an aberration, a strange moment that would be gossiped tomorrow and forgotten by next week. "I hate this," she said quietly. "All of it. The pretending, the smiling, standing in corners waiting for someone to decide I'm worth the trouble. I hate that my value is determined by whether some man I don't know decides I'm acceptable. I hate that I'm good at being invisible because I've had to be. And I hate that even invisible, I'm still here, still trying, still hoping something will change when I know it won't." The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered. Eliza felt her face burn. She'd just confessed her entire miserable existence to a man whose reputation suggested he ate weakness for breakfast. Dominic didn't react, didn't laugh, didn't look disgusted or amused or any of the things she'd braced for. "Better," he said. "Now we're getting somewhere." "Where exactly are we getting?" "To a conversation worth having." He spun her again, effortless. "I have a problem." "Just one? How refreshing." His mouth did that not-quite-smile thing again. "My brother died 8 months ago. He left behind a daughter, 4 years old, beautiful child, terrorizes my entire household. I'm very sorry for your loss." The words were automatic, polite. "Don't be. We hadn't spoken in years. He was an idiot." Dominic's expression didn't change. His widow remarried immediately. New husband doesn't want the complication of a child that isn't his. She's fighting me for custody, claims I'm unfit, dangerous, not suitable for raising a little girl. "Are you?" "Absolutely." No hesitation. "But I'm all she has, and I don't lose." They turned again. Eliza could feel eyes on them now, whispers starting at the edges of the ballroom. The Duke of Ashenhurst dancing with Eliza Whitmore. That would be tomorrow's headline, delivered with disbelief and speculation in equal measure. "Why are you telling me this?" Eliza asked. "Because I need a wife." He said it like he was ordering breakfast, casual, matter-of-fact, completely insane. "The courts won't grant custody to a bachelor. Too scandalous, too suspicious. But a married man with a respectable wife? That changes the equation." Eliza's feet nearly tangled. He caught her, steadied her, continued as if nothing had happened. "You're joking." I don't joke, it's inefficient. You can't possibly be suggesting a marriage of convenience, strategic alliance. You get security, status, and an escape from whatever fresh hell your mother has planned. I get a wife who'll help me keep my niece. Everyone wins. That's insane. That's practical. His dark eyes fixed on hers. You said you hate this life, that you're tired of waiting for someone to decide you're worth the trouble. I'm deciding, right now, you're worth it, not because you're perfect or particularly pleasant, but because you're desperate enough to consider this and smart enough to see the benefit. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. You're invisible, unmarried. Your family's drowning in debt and social disgrace. You have no options and fewer prospects. In 6 months, maybe a year, you'll be forced to accept whatever scraps you can get. Lord Ashford's decrepit nephew, or worse. He paused. Or you can walk away from all of this tonight. Marry me. Become a duchess. Help me save a child who deserves better than the mother trying to abandon her." The music was ending. Other couples were separating, applauding politely. Dominic hadn't released her. "This is madness," Eliza said. "Yes, I'd be trading one prison for another. Perhaps, but mine has better food and no one will pity you." His grip on her hand tightened fractionally. "Think about it. You have until midnight. That's tonight." "I'm aware. I'm leaving for London at dawn. I need an answer before then." He finally released her, stepped back, gave a small bow that somehow managed to be more insult than courtesy. "Midnight, Miss Whitmore. The garden entrance. Come if you're brave enough to save yourself. Stay if you'd rather drown with dignity." Then he was gone, cutting through the crowd with the ease of someone who'd never cared what anyone thought. People parted for him automatically, then turned to stare at Eliza, speculation written across every face. She stood frozen on the edge of the dance floor, her mother already pushing through the crowd toward her, questions forming on her lips. What had just happened? The Duke of Ashenhurst had offered her marriage, a strategic arrangement, a business transaction dressed up in wedding vows. He was right about one thing. She was desperate. Desperate enough that even this insane proposal carried a terrible, seductive logic. "Eliza!" Her mother seized her arm. "What did he say? What did he want? Everyone's talking." "Nothing." The lie came automatically. "He was bored. It was a novelty, that's all." But her mother's eyes were calculating, already spinning scenarios, already seeing possibilities where Eliza saw only chaos. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Eliza smiled when required, nodded at appropriate moments, and avoided the questions people were suddenly brave enough to ask now that she'd become interesting. The invisible girl had been seen by the most dangerous man in the room. That made her visible. Temporarily. Terrifyingly. She watched the clock. 11:15, 11:30, 11:45. "Midnight," he'd said, "the garden entrance." This was insane. She should go home. Forget this ever happened. Let the moment fade back into the obscurity she'd perfected. But then what? Another season of corners and curtains. Another year of watching her mother's hope curdle into resentment. Another marriage market where she was the merchandise no one wanted, marked down until even bargain hunters passed her by. Lord Ashford's nephew was still watching her from across the room. 60 years old. Watery eyes. A solution, her mother would call him. A surrender, Eliza knew. The clock struck midnight. Eliza made her choice. She slipped through the ballroom, down the hall, toward the garden entrance where moonlight spilled across manicured lawns and the distant sound of the orchestra faded to nothing. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was foolish, reckless, the kind of decision desperate people made when they'd run out of good options. She pushed open the door. Dominic Hale stood in the garden, hands in his pockets, face unreadable in the shadows. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "Neither did I." "Change your mind. There's still time." "Is that what you want?" "What I want is irrelevant." He stepped forward into the light. "This is about what you can live with. A marriage to a man you don't know. A child you've never met. A life that will demand things you can't predict. I won't pretend to love you. I won't promise happiness. I'll give you safety, status, and a purpose beyond survival. That's the offer. Take it or leave it." Eliza looked at him. Really looked. Past the reputation and the rumors, past the harsh features and the colder words, she saw exhaustion there. Determination. Something that might have been grief, buried so deep it had fossilized into rage. He was telling the truth. This wasn't romance. This wasn't rescue. This was a transaction between two people who'd both learned that survival required sacrifice. "If I say yes," Eliza said slowly, "I want your word. No lies, no games. Whatever this is, we're honest about it." "Agreed." "And the child. I want to meet her before I decide anything permanent." "Fair." "And if it doesn't work, if I can't do this or you change your mind, then we end it, quietly, carefully, and you'll walk away with enough money to start over somewhere else." He held out his hand again, the same gesture from the ballroom. "Those are my terms. Are they acceptable?" Eliza thought about her mother's desperate scheming, her father's shame, the corner by the fern where she'd stood for 3 seasons, watching life happen to other people. She thought about the little girl who'd lost her father and might lose her future. She thought about the man in front of her, offering her a way out that terrified her more than staying ever could. "Yes," she said, and took his hand. Dominic's fingers closed around hers. Warm, certain, as if he'd known her answer before she'd even arrived. "Then we leave tonight," he said. "Pack light. We'll send for the rest later." "Tonight? My mother will survive. Write her a letter. Tell her you're getting married. Tell her whatever you need to, but we're leaving within the hour. You don't waste time." "I don't have time to waste. Neither do you." He released her hand. 1 hour. The north entrance. Don't bring anything you can't carry. Then he was walking away, leaving her alone in the garden with the weight of what she'd just agreed to settling over her shoulders like a cloak made of lead. Eliza stood there for a long moment, watching the stars through the branches overhead. Somewhere in the house, the party continued. People danced, laughed, made polite conversation that meant nothing and everything. She'd just agreed to marry a stranger. She'd just bet her entire future on a man whose reputation suggested he'd destroy her without blinking if it served his purposes. She'd just made the kind of choice that separated the desperate from the destroyed. Eliza turned and walked back toward the house, her mind already racing ahead. An hour. She had an hour to pack a life, write a letter her mother would never forgive, and walk away from everything she'd known. It should have been impossible. It should have been terrifying. But as she slipped back inside, avoiding the ballroom, heading for the entrance where her mother's carriage waited, Eliza felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Dangerous, foolish, possibly fatal hope. But hope nonetheless. 1 hour later, standing at the north entrance with a single bag and a letter she'd sealed with shaking hands, Eliza watched a carriage pull up out of the darkness. The door opened. Dominic Hale looked out at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Last chance," he said. "I'm here, aren't I?" "Being here and being ready are different things." "Then I guess we'll find out which one I am." She climbed into the carriage. The door closed. The driver snapped the reins. They rolled forward into the night, leaving behind the only life Eliza had ever known. Inside the carriage, Dominic sat across from her, silent. Outside, the city began to fall away, replaced by countryside bathed in moonlight. "What happens now?" Eliza asked. "Now?" Dominic leaned back against the seat. "Now we find out if you're as brave as you pretended to be in that garden. And I find out if I've made a terrible mistake or a brilliant move. And if it's a mistake, then we both pay for it." He closed his eyes. "Get some sleep, Miss Whitmore. Tomorrow your old life ends and your new one begins. You'll want to be rested for that." Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, explanations, some kind of reassurance that she hadn't just destroyed herself. But exhaustion pulled at her, the kind that came from years of holding herself together through sheer will. So she closed her eyes, listened to the rhythm of the wheels on the road. And somewhere between the ballroom she'd left and the future rushing toward her, Eliza Whitmore, the invisible girl, the unwanted daughter, the woman no one chose, let herself fall into sleep. When she woke, everything would be different. For better or worse, she'd made her choice. Now she'd live with it. The carriage rattled to a stop just as dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gray that matched Eliza's mood. She'd slept poorly, waking every time the wheels hit a rut, her mind spinning with questions she hadn't dared ask while Dominic sat across from her in silence. Now, looking out the window, she understood why he'd said nothing about their destination. Ashenhurst Manor rose from the landscape like a monument to everything unwelcoming. It wasn't beautiful. There was no softness to it, no attempt at charm, just stone and iron and windows that reflected the morning light with the warmth of a glacier. The kind of house that looked like it had been built to withstand a siege and had never quite recovered from the disappointment of peacetime. "Home," Dominic said, the word carrying no affection whatsoever. "It's very—" Eliza searched for something polite. Hostile? Unwelcoming? Built by someone who hated visitors and wanted them to know it? He stepped out of the carriage without waiting for her response. "Yes, it's all of those things." Eliza followed, her legs stiff from the journey, her borrowed dress crumpled beyond repair. The morning air bit cold, promising winter wasn't far off. Around them, the ground stretched in every direction, meticulously maintained but somehow lifeless, as if even the gardens knew better than to look too cheerful. A woman appeared in the doorway, tall, thin, with iron-gray hair pulled back so severely it looked painful. Her face was all sharp angles and sharper judgment, taking in Eliza with a single dismissive glance that communicated everything words didn't need to. "Mrs. Brennan," Dominic said, "this is Miss Whitmore. She'll be staying. Prepare the Duchess's chambers." The woman's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or disapproval, possibly both. "The Duchess's chambers have been closed for 3 years, Your Grace." "Then open them." He gestured toward Eliza's single bag. "See that her things are taken up. We'll take breakfast in an hour." "Very good, sir." Mrs. Brennan's tone suggested it was anything but good. She snapped her fingers and a young maid materialized from somewhere, scurrying forward to collect Eliza's bag with the efficiency of someone who'd learned not to ask questions. Dominic strode toward the house. Eliza had no choice but to follow, very aware of Mrs. Brennan's eyes boring into her back with the warmth of a blade. Inside was worse. The entrance hall stretched up 3 stories, all dark wood and darker portraits of people who looked like they'd died angry and wanted everyone to remember it. The furniture was expensive but joyless, the kind of pieces that existed to be admired, not used. Everything gleamed with polish and smelled faintly of lemon oil and old disappointment. "The east wing is mine," Dominic said, not slowing his pace. "The west is yours. The child's rooms are on the 2nd floor, center. Kitchen's below stairs, library's through there. Don't go into the north wing." "Why not?" "Because I'm telling you not to." He stopped at the base of a staircase wide enough to march an army up. "Mrs. Brennan runs the household. She'll show you whatever you need. Dinner's at 8. Don't be late." "That's it? That's all the instruction I get? What else do you need? You have a roof, rooms, staff. Figure out the rest." He started to turn away, then paused. "The child's name is Charlotte. She doesn't speak to strangers. Barely speaks at all anymore, actually. Don't take it personally." "When do I meet her?" "When she's ready, or when the lawyers require it. Whichever comes first." This time he did leave, disappearing down a corridor with the same cold efficiency he'd brought to everything else. Eliza stood alone in the entrance hall, listening to his footsteps fade. Somewhere above, a clock ticked. Somewhere else, pipes creaked. The house settled around her with sounds that suggested it was as thrilled about her presence as Mrs. Brennan had been. "This way, miss." The young maid had reappeared, hovering nervously near the stairs. She couldn't have been more than 16, with red hair escaping from beneath her cap and freckles that made her look even younger. "Thank you," Eliza said, following her up. The Duchess's chambers were on the 2nd floor, down a corridor lined with more disapproving portraits. The maid opened a door onto a suite that was somehow both enormous and suffocating. Heavy curtains blocked most of the light. The furniture was all dark wood and darker upholstery. A massive bed dominated one wall, its canopy hung with fabric that might have been burgundy once but had faded to the color of old blood. "Mrs. Brennan says to tell you breakfast will be in the small dining room," the maid said, setting down Eliza's bag. "Down the main stairs, left corridor, 3rd door. She says don't be late or cook gets angry." "What's your name?" Eliza asked. The girl looked startled, as if no one had asked that in a while. "Mary, miss." "Thank you, Mary, for showing me up." "Yes, miss." She bobbed something that might have been a curtsy and fled. Eliza closed the door and leaned against it, surveying her new domain. The room was cleaner than she'd expected. Someone had clearly dusted recently, but it had that abandoned quality of spaces that had been unloved for too long. She crossed to the windows and yanked open the curtains, letting in weak morning light that didn't improve the view. More manicured grounds, more gray sky. In the distance, she could just make out what looked like a stable block. A wedding portrait hung over the mantel. The previous Duchess, presumably. She'd been beautiful in that fragile, ethereal way that suggested she'd died young, and everyone had pretended it was romantic rather than tragic. Blonde hair, pale skin, eyes that looked past the painter toward something the rest of them couldn't see. Eliza wondered how long she'd lasted here before the house or the loneliness or Dominic's particular brand of warmth had finished her. "Cheerful thought," she muttered to the portrait. "Any advice?" "No, didn't think so." She washed her face in cold water from the basin, changed into her least crumpled dress, and made her way back downstairs. The small dining room was roughly the size of her family's entire ground floor, with a table that could seat 20 and currently held one place setting at the far end. Dominic sat there, reading a newspaper, a cup of coffee steaming at his elbow. He didn't look up when she entered. "Sit," he said, turning a page. There was only one chair. Eliza sat. A different maid appeared, older, sterner, and deposited a plate of eggs and toast in front of her without a word. The eggs were perfect. The toast was precise. Everything tasted like it had been cooked by someone who viewed food as a duty rather than a pleasure. "We're getting married tomorrow," Dominic said, still not looking up. 10 o'clock. The vicar's coming here. Witnesses will be Mrs. Brennan and my solicitor. Eliza's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Tomorrow? I told you I don't waste time. You also said I'd meet Charlotte first." "You will, this afternoon. Her nurse brings her down at 3. He finally looked up, fixing her with those dark eyes. "Questions?" About 1,000, Eliza thought, but she asked the one that mattered most. "What exactly do you expect from me?" "In what sense?" "In every sense. You said this was strategic, a marriage of convenience. But what does that actually mean? What are my responsibilities? What are the rules?" Dominic set down the newspaper with careful precision. "You will be introduced as my wife. You will attend necessary social functions without embarrassing me. You will help establish a stable household environment for Charlotte. You will not interfere with my business affairs or question where I go or what I do. In exchange, you'll have access to my name, my resources, and my protection. The marriage will be legal in every sense except one. I won't demand intimacy you don't choose to give." "How generous." "It's practical. I need a wife on paper. What happens beyond that is negotiable." He paused. "Any other questions?" "What happens if I fail, if I can't do what you need?" "Then Charlotte goes to her mother's new husband, I lose custody, and you walk away with enough money to start over. We both lose, but at least we tried." He picked up his coffee. "I don't expect failure, Miss Whitmore. You wouldn't have come if you weren't capable of this." "You don't know that." "I know enough. You survived 3 seasons of humiliation without breaking. You made a decision last night that most people wouldn't have the courage for. You're here, in a strange house, with a man you don't trust, and you haven't run screaming yet. That tells me what I need to know." The compliment, if it was a compliment, landed strangely. Eliza looked down at her eggs, no longer hungry. "I should tell you something," she said quietly. "I'm not good with children. I never had siblings. I don't know how to—" "Charlotte doesn't need you to be good with children. She needs you to be present, consistent, someone who doesn't leave." His expression shifted, something harder moving beneath the surface. "Her mother's already abandoned her. Her father's dead. I'm all she has, and I'm not exactly warm. If you can just be there, be steady, that's enough." "What if she hates me?" "She probably will. At first." He stood, conversation apparently over. 3 o'clock, drawing room. Don't be late." He left her alone with perfect eggs and imperfect thoughts. Eliza spent the rest of the morning exploring. The house was a maze of corridors and closed doors, half of which seemed to lead nowhere useful. She found the library, massive, well-stocked, clearly unused. The music room, instruments gathering dust under Holland covers. A conservatory that should have been beautiful, but felt like a mausoleum for plants that had given up trying. Everywhere she went, staff materialized and vanished like ghosts, watching her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. She heard whispers when she passed, caught fragments of conversation that cut off abruptly when she appeared. New girl thinks she can just, not even proper, is it? No engagement, no, mark my words, she won't last a month. By lunch, another solitary meal in the small dining room, Eliza's nerves were stretched thin. The house felt like it was testing her, waiting for her to crack. Mrs. Brennan appeared twice, each time with some thinly veiled criticism disguised as helpfulness. "You'll want to change before meeting the child, miss. Something more appropriate." "The master prefers punctuality, miss. Best not keep him waiting." "The household runs on schedule, miss. We don't accommodate lateness." Each miss landed like a small insult. A reminder that Eliza wasn't really the Duchess yet. Wasn't really anything except an interloper who'd arrived in the middle of the night with one bag and delusions of belonging. At 2:50, Eliza stood outside the drawing room door, smoothing down the best dress she'd brought, which still looked shabby against the house's cold elegance. Inside, she could hear voices. One deep, one higher, younger. She pushed open the door. The drawing room was less oppressive than the rest of the house, with windows that actually let in light and furniture that looked like it might have been sat on occasionally. Dominic stood near the fireplace, talking to a woman in a nurse's uniform. And there, half hidden behind the nurse's skirts, was a small girl with dark hair and her uncle's serious eyes. Charlotte. She was tiny, 4 years old but looked younger, with the kind of fragility that came from grief rather than illness. She wore a perfectly pressed dress and perfectly polished shoes and held herself with the rigid posture of someone who'd learned that stillness was safety. "Miss Whitmore," Dominic said. "This is Mrs. Davies, Charlotte's nurse, and Charlotte." The nurse nodded, professional but cold. Charlotte said nothing, just stared at Eliza with eyes that seemed too old for her small face. Eliza knelt down, bringing herself to Charlotte's level. The girl didn't move. "Hello, Charlotte," Eliza said softly. "My name is Eliza." Nothing. Not even a blink. "Charlotte doesn't speak much to new people," Mrs. Davies said, her tone suggesting this was Eliza's fault somehow. "She's sensitive." "That's all right," Eliza said, still looking at Charlotte. "I'm not very good at talking to new people either. We can just sit here if you want. No pressure." Charlotte's eyes flickered, not quite interest, not quite trust, but something. "Perhaps Miss Whitmore would like to join us for tea," Dominic said. "Charlotte has tea every afternoon at 3:30, in the nursery." It wasn't a suggestion. Eliza nodded. "I'd like that, if Charlotte doesn't mind." The girl looked at her uncle. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Charlotte took Mrs. Davies' hand and walked toward the door, moving with that same careful stillness. "She'll expect you in half an hour," Mrs. Davies said to Eliza. "The nursery is second floor, east corridor. Don't be late. Routine is important." They left. Eliza stood, her knees aching from the brief kneel. "That went well," Dominic said dryly. "She hates me." "She doesn't trust you. Different thing." He moved to pour himself a drink from the sideboard. "Give it time." "You said I'd meet her before deciding anything permanent. This was barely a meeting." "You met her. You're still here. That's decided." He took a drink. "The wedding's tomorrow, Eliza. If you're going to back out, do it now. I can have you on a train to London within the hour, with enough money to disappear if that's what you want. But if you stay, you commit. No halfway. No changing your mind when it gets difficult." Eliza thought about Charlotte's two old eyes, about the empty house and hostile staff, about the marriage certificate that would bind her to a man who treated affection like a weakness and apparently viewed her as a useful tool. "I'm staying," she said. "Why?" The question caught her off guard. "You said you needed I know what I need. I'm asking what you need, why you're really here. Because if it's just escape, you'll break. This house breaks people who don't have a reason stronger than themselves." Eliza met his gaze, saw the challenge there, the test. "That little girl," she said slowly, "just lost her father. Her mother doesn't want her. Everyone in her life has either died or left. And tomorrow I'm going to promise to be her family, whether she wants me or not. So I need to be here because she needs someone to be here. Because if I walk away now, I'm just one more person who abandoned her, and I won't do that." Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Not warmth exactly, but acknowledgement. "Good answer," he said. "Now go to tea. And Eliza, don't try to make her like you. She doesn't need to like you. She just needs to know you won't leave." The nursery was brighter than the rest of the house, with painted walls and toys scattered across a carpet that had actually seen use. Charlotte sat at a small table, a tea set laid out in front of her. Mrs. Davies stood nearby, watchful as a guard. "Miss Whitmore," the nurse said, "please, sit." There was a child-sized chair across from Charlotte. Eliza folded herself into it awkwardly, her knees nearly hitting her chin. Charlotte watched this with something that might have been amusement hiding behind her serious expression. "Charlotte's going to pour," Mrs. Davies announced. "Aren't you, dear?" The girl picked up the teapot. Empty, Eliza noticed, and carefully tipped it over a cup, made the motion of pouring, set the pot down with precision. Sugar? Charlotte's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, please, Eliza said. 2 lumps. Charlotte added invisible sugar, stirred with an invisible spoon, pushed the cup toward Eliza with both hands. Thank you, Eliza said, lifting the empty cup to her lips. Perfect. Charlotte's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then it was gone. They sat there for 30 minutes, having tea that didn't exist, making small talk that was mostly silence. Mrs. Davies watched the entire time, cataloging every mistake, every awkward moment. When the clock struck 4, she stood. Time for Charlotte's rest, she announced. Say goodbye, dear. Goodbye, Eliza, Charlotte whispered. It was the first time she'd used Eliza's name, small victory, possibly meaningless, but Eliza held on to it anyway. That night, alone in the Duchess's chambers, Eliza tried to sleep and failed. The bed was too large, the room too quiet. Tomorrow she'd be married. Tomorrow everything would be legal, binding, real. She'd made a choice in that garden. Now she'd live with it. But lying there in the dark, listening to the house settle and creak, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that she'd traded one cage for another. This one was larger, more expensive, but it was still a cage. And somewhere in this cold house, a little girl who'd lost everything was learning to be lonely in rooms filled with toys. Eliza had promised not to leave. Now she had to figure out how to stay. The wedding was exactly as romantic as expected, which was to say, not at all. The vicar arrived at 9:50, looking uncomfortable in his traveling cloak. Mrs. Brennan and a thin man Eliza assumed was the solicitor served as witnesses, both wearing expressions that suggested they'd rather be literally anywhere else. Dominic appeared 5 minutes before 10, dressed in dark gray that made him look like he was attending a funeral. Eliza wore her best dress, which was still her only decent dress, which everyone clearly noticed. The ceremony took 12 minutes. Do you take this woman? Yes. And do you take this man? Yes. Then by the power vested in me, it was done, signed, witnessed, legal. Dominic kissed her cheek with all the passion of someone signing a business contract, which, Eliza supposed, was exactly what this was. Congratulations, Your Grace, the solicitor said to her, the title sounding wrong in his mouth. Your Grace, Duchess of Ashenhurst. Eliza Whitmore was gone. Eliza Hale existed now, at least on paper. She waited to feel different, felt exactly the same, just more trapped. The vicar left. The solicitor left. Mrs. Brennan disappeared with a sniff that communicated her opinion more clearly than words. Dominic stood in the drawing room, pouring himself a drink he clearly needed. Well, he said, that's done. Yes. Eliza's hands were shaking. She clasped them together to hide it. What happens now? Now we wait. The custody hearing is in 6 weeks. My lawyers will present evidence of our marriage, stable household, appropriate environment for a child. Her mother's lawyers will argue that I'm dangerous and you're a fortune hunter. The judge will decide. And if we lose, we don't lose. He downed the drink. I don't lose. There was something almost frightening in his certainty, as if losing wasn't an option his mind would allow. I should check on Charlotte, Eliza said. She's having lessons. Mrs. Davies doesn't like interruptions. I'm her aunt now. Legally, I think I'm allowed to interrupt. Dominic's eyebrows rose slightly. Interesting. You're actually going to try. What did you think I'd do? Hide in your rooms, avoid conflict, wait for instructions. He set down the glass. Most people do. I'm not most people. No, he said quietly. You're not. Eliza found Charlotte in the schoolroom, working through letters with grim determination. Mrs. Davies looked up sharply when Eliza entered. We're in the middle of lessons. I know. I thought I'd observe, if that's all right. It clearly wasn't all right, but Eliza sat down anyway, watching Charlotte trace letters with a careful hand. The girl glanced at her once, twice, then focused back on her work with the intensity of someone who'd learned that perfect performance prevented problems. After 30 minutes, Mrs. Davies couldn't take it anymore. Charlotte needs to focus, Your Grace. Perhaps you could return later. The title still sounded wrong, but Eliza used it anyway. I am returning later, Mrs. Davies, and tomorrow, and the day after. Because I'm family now, which means I get to be boring and present and occasionally inconvenient. Charlotte should probably get used to that. Charlotte's hand paused mid-letter. She looked up at Eliza with those serious eyes, and for just a moment, something almost like hope flickered there. Then it was gone, buried under learned caution. But Eliza had seen it. That night, as she lay in the too large bed in the Duchess's chambers, Eliza realized something important. Dominic had been right about one thing. This house broke people. She could feel it trying to break her, grinding away at her resolve with cold rooms and colder staff and the weight of everything she'd agreed to. But she'd survived 3 seasons of being invisible, survived her mother's disappointment and her father's shame and the knowledge that nobody wanted her. This house couldn't be worse than that. And somewhere down the hall, a little girl was learning to trust again. Eliza would be there when she did, even if it killed her. The next morning, she found Dominic in his study, buried in paperwork. I need money, she said. He looked up, startled. For what? Clothes, appropriate ones. If I'm going to be the Duchess of Ashenhurst, I should probably look the part. Unless you want people thinking you married a charity case. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Fair point. How much? I have no idea. Enough for a wardrobe that won't embarrass you in court. He wrote something on a piece of paper, signed it, handed it over. Give this to my banker in town. He'll arrange everything. Eliza looked at the number, blinked. This is too much. It's what's appropriate. Don't question it. He returned to his papers, then paused. Eliza? Yes? You didn't run. You noticed. I notice everything. He met her eyes. That matters. It was the closest thing to approval she'd gotten from him. Eliza took it and left before he could take it back. 2 weeks passed. Eliza established routines. Breakfast with Dominic, silent but companionable. Tea with Charlotte. Still mostly quiet, but occasionally punctuated with actual conversation. Evenings in the library, reading while Dominic worked through correspondence that never seemed to end. The staff slowly, grudgingly, began to thaw. Mary the maid started actually making eye contact. Cook stopped burning Eliza's toast. Mrs. Brennan still radiated disapproval, but it was marginally less intense. Progress. Slow, grinding, exhausting progress. Then the letter arrived. Eliza found Dominic in his study, the paper crumpled in his fist, his face carved from stone. What's wrong? She asked. He handed her the letter without a word. It was from Charlotte's mother, or rather, her mother's lawyers. They were moving the custody hearing up. 3 weeks instead of 6. And they had new evidence. Witnesses who would testify that Dominic was unfit, that his marriage was a sham, that Eliza was being paid to play a role. How do they know? Eliza asked. Someone talked. Someone always talks. He stood, paced to the window. They're going to destroy us in court. Make it look like exactly what it is, a strategic arrangement. The judge will see through it. We'll lose Charlotte. Not if we don't let them. He turned. What? They think this is an arrangement, so we prove it isn't. We make it real. It is real, legally. Not in the ways that matter to a judge. Eliza's mind was racing now, seeing the angles, the possibilities. They'll put us on the stand, ask questions, test us. If we look like strangers pretending we lose, so we stop pretending. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we actually try. Be a real family, or at least look like one convincingly enough that no judge can prove otherwise. Dominic stared at her. You want to lie better. I want to make the lie true. She moved closer. You said I wouldn't have come if I wasn't capable of this. So let me be capable. Trust me. Let me help you save her. For a long moment he said nothing, then slowly he nodded. 3 weeks, he said. That's all we have. Then we'd better start now. Eliza didn't know if it would work, didn't know if 3 weeks could build what usually took years. But as she left his study, she felt that same dangerous hope from the garden, the kind that either saved you or destroyed you. She was about to find out which. 3 weeks wasn't enough time to build a life. Barely enough to build a convincing illusion. But Eliza threw herself into it with the desperation of someone who understood that failure meant a 4-year-old girl lost her last chance at family. The first thing she did was fire Mrs. Davies. "You can't dismiss the nurse," Dominic said when she told him. They were in his study, late afternoon light slanting through windows that needed cleaning. "Charlotte's had her since birth." "Charlotte's had her as a warden, not a caretaker," Eliza corrected. "That woman treats her like a porcelain doll that might break if handled incorrectly. She needs someone who actually sees her as a child." "And you're qualified to make that assessment after 2 weeks?" "I'm qualified because I actually talked to Charlotte instead of talking at her." Eliza crossed her arms. "Mrs. Davies goes. We hire someone new, someone warm. Someone who doesn't make that little girl feel like existing is an inconvenience." Dominic studied her for a long moment. "You're serious?" "Completely. This will cause problems. Mrs. Davies has been with the family for, I don't care how long she's been here. She's making Charlotte worse, not better. And when we walk into that courtroom, I need to be able to honestly say that child is thriving. Can you say that now, with Mrs. Davies running everything?" He couldn't. They both knew it. "Fine," he said finally. "Find someone better. You have 1 week." Eliza found someone in 3 days. Miss Sarah Pemberton, 26, recently returned from governess work in Scotland with references that praised her patience and warmth. More importantly, when Eliza brought her to meet Charlotte, the little girl actually smiled. "She likes stories," Miss Pemberton said, kneeling to Charlotte's level without prompting. "Don't you? I can tell. You have that look about you." Charlotte nodded shyly. "Well then, we'll get along splendidly. I know at least 100 stories, maybe more. We'll have to count them together." Mrs. Davies left in a fury, predicting disaster and ruin. The house staff whispered their disapproval. Mrs. Brennan's mouth became a thin line of judgment that barely moved when she spoke. Eliza didn't care, because 2 days later she heard Charlotte laugh. Actually laugh. Not a polite giggle. A real, full-bellied laugh that echoed through the hallways and stopped Dominic mid-stride on his way to the library. "What was that?" he asked Eliza, who'd been passing in the opposite direction. "That," Eliza said, "was progress." But progress in one area meant exposure in others. The local society, which had initially been too shocked by Dominic's sudden marriage to react properly, began circling with questions. Invitations arrived. Not friendly ones. The kind that came wrapped in social obligation, designed to test and probe and find weakness. "Lady Ashford is hosting a dinner," Dominic said one morning, dropping the invitation on the breakfast table like it was something diseased. "Next week. She's requested our attendance." "Then we'll attend," Eliza said, cutting into her eggs with more force than necessary. "You don't understand. This isn't a dinner. It's an inquisition. She's one of Charlotte's mother's closest friends. This is a hunting expedition." "Good. Let her hunt. She won't find anything." Eliza met his eyes. "Unless you'd rather hide. Send our regrets. Make it look like we're afraid. We should be afraid. These people are vultures. Then we'll be vultures right back." She set down her fork. "You hired me to play a duchess. So I'll play one, but you need to play along too. No more treating me like hired help in public. No more separate lives under the same roof. If we're doing this, we do it properly." "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you act like you actually married me because you wanted to, not because you needed a prop for court." She stood, napkin dropping to her plate. "The hearing is in 2 weeks. We need to be believable. That starts with you believing it yourself." She left him sitting there, coffee growing cold, expression unreadable. The dinner at Lady Ashford's was exactly as terrible as promised. 20 guests, each one positioned like pieces on a chessboard, all watching Eliza with the focused intensity of predators who'd scented blood. "So lovely to finally meet you, Your Grace," Lady Ashford said, the title delivered with just enough emphasis to make it sound like an accusation. She was 60, impeccably dressed, with eyes like a hawk and a smile that cut. "Such a whirlwind courtship. You must tell us all about it." "There's not much to tell," Eliza said, accepting a glass of wine from a passing servant. "We met. We understood each other. We married. Some things don't require lengthy deliberation." "How wonderfully modern." The word modern sounded like an insult. And your family? The Whitmores of… Where was it again? Surrey, Eliza said, refusing to flinch. Though I imagine you already knew that. Of course, I make it a point to know everything about everyone. Lady Ashford's smile sharpened. Your father had some unfortunate business dealings, didn't he? Such a shame when good families fall on hard times. Across the room, Dominic stiffened. Eliza felt his attention shift toward her like a physical thing. My father made mistakes, Eliza said evenly, but he taught me something valuable in the process. How to recognize when someone's testing you, and how to refuse to break. Lady Ashford's eyes glittered. How resilient. Tell me, dear, what does dear Charlotte think of having a new aunt? She's such a sensitive child. All these changes must be so difficult for her. Charlotte is adjusting beautifully, Eliza said, the lie smooth and practiced. She's a remarkable little girl, strong, braver than most adults I know. Is she? How fascinating. Because I heard from dear Victoria, that's Charlotte's mother, you understand, that the poor child hasn't spoken more than 2 words together since her father's death. Practically mute, she said. Such trauma. One wonders if more upheaval is really what she needs. The name Victoria landed like a stone in still water. Charlotte's mother, the woman trying to take her daughter away while simultaneously abandoning her. Perhaps Victoria's information is outdated, Eliza said, voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. Charlotte speaks quite freely when she's with people who actually listen. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Lady Ashford's smile turned glacial. What a spirited defense. Though one might wonder if a woman who's known the child for mere weeks is really qualified to judge what's best for her. One might also wonder if a mother who remarried within months of her husband's death and immediately tried to dispose of her daughter has any right to judge anything at all. The room went dead silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward them. Dominic moved through the crowd like a shark cutting through water, reaching Eliza's side in seconds. Forgive my wife, he said smoothly, his hand finding Eliza's elbow. She's still adjusting to society's more delicate conventions. Perhaps we should take some air. He steered her toward the terrace before anyone could respond. Behind them, the whispers started immediately. A rising tide of scandal and speculation. Outside, the night air bit cold. Dominic released her arm and stepped back, putting distance between them. What the hell was that? He asked quietly. That was me refusing to let them tear Charlotte apart for entertainment. That was you declaring war on people who will destroy you without blinking. Good. Let them try. Eliza turned to face him, anger making her reckless. You wanted me to play the Duchess? Fine. But I won't play the meek, grateful little wife who lets them insult your family to my face. That child is being used as a weapon by her own mother, and these people think it's amusing. So yes, I declared war. You should be thanking me. Thanking you. You just made an enemy of the most influential woman in 3 counties. She was already our enemy. I just stopped pretending she wasn't. Eliza's hands were shaking. She pressed them against the terrace railing to hide it. You told me not to embarrass you. I didn't. I defended us. There's a difference. Dominic stared at her, something complicated moving across his face. Anger, maybe, or possibly something closer to surprise. You're right, he said finally. What? You're right. She was already our enemy. They all are. He moved closer until they were standing side by side, both facing the darkened gardens. I married you because I needed someone who wouldn't break under pressure. I'm starting to think I underestimated what that actually meant. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. He paused. We should go back inside. Leaving now looks like retreat. Then let's not retreat. They went back inside, faced the stairs in whispers with chins up and expressions neutral, stayed for the full dinner, made polite conversation, gave absolutely nothing away. By the time they left, Eliza's face hurt from holding the smile, and her feet ached from the borrowed shoes that didn't quite fit. In the carriage ride home, Dominic broke the silence. That was well done, he said. Difficult, but well done. I thought you said I declared war. You did, but you didn't lose your composure. That matters more. He looked out the window at the passing countryside. The hearing is in 10 days. They're going to use tonight against us. Claim you're unstable, unsuitable. Let them try. They will. And they'll have evidence. Witnesses who will testify that you're volatile, aggressive, everything a child doesn't need. Eliza's stomach turned cold. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to be smarter, more careful. He finally looked at her. No more outbursts. No more defending me in public. When we're in court, you need to be perfect, calm, the ideal stepmother. I can't be perfect. Then learn. His voice was hard. Because if you can't, we lose everything. The words sat between them for the rest of the ride. When they reached Ashenhurst, Eliza went straight to her rooms without saying goodnight. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, mind spinning. Perfect. He needed her to be perfect. She'd never been perfect in her life. The next morning, Dominic was gone before breakfast. A note said he'd be in London for 3 days, meeting with lawyers, preparing the case. Eliza was left alone with Charlotte and Miss Pemberton and the growing certainty that she was going to fail. She spent the day with Charlotte, trying to be normal, trying not to let the little girl see her fear. They had tea, read stories, walked in the gardens where winter was starting to bite. Charlotte was opening up more, talking about her father in small, careful sentences that suggested she was testing whether it was safe. Papa used to take me to see the horses, she said, hand in Eliza's as they walked, before he got sick. What were the horses like? Big and soft. Their noses were soft. Charlotte kicked at a pebble. Mama didn't like the stables, said they smelled bad. Some people don't appreciate horses. Do you? I've never spent much time around them, Eliza admitted. But I'd like to learn. Maybe you could teach me? Charlotte looked up at her with those serious eyes. You're staying, right? You won't leave like Mama? The question hit like a physical blow. Eliza knelt down, bringing herself to Charlotte's level. I'm staying, she said firmly. I promise you that. No matter what happens, I'm not leaving. What if the judge says you have to? The judge won't. But what if he does? Eliza didn't have an answer for that, because the truth was, the judge might. They might lose. Charlotte might be sent back to a mother who didn't want her, and there would be nothing Eliza could do to stop it. Then I'll fight him, Eliza said instead. I'll fight everyone if I have to, because you deserve to be here. This is your home, and I'm not letting anyone take that away from you. Charlotte studied her face like she was searching for lies. Then slowly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. That night, alone in the library, Eliza found herself digging through Dominic's papers. She shouldn't have. Privacy, propriety, all the rules she was supposed to follow. But something nagged at her. Some instinct that said she was missing something important. She found it in a locked drawer. Not well locked. The key was in a box on the desk, barely hidden. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All from Charlotte's mother, Victoria. Eliza read them. Wished she hadn't. They painted a picture she hadn't expected. A woman trapped in a marriage she never wanted. A husband, Dominic's brother, who drank too much and spent money they didn't have. Desperate pleas for help that went unanswered. And through it all, references to Dominic that made Eliza's blood run cold. Your brother watches me like I'm property he's waiting to collect. He frightens Charlotte. She cries when he visits. I know you think he's protecting us, but protection that comes with chains isn't freedom. The letters were dated. Months before Charlotte's father died. Years, some of them. Building a case, a narrative, evidence that Dominic was dangerous, controlling. Everything Victoria's lawyers would claim in court. Find something interesting? Eliza spun around. Dominic stood in the doorway, still in his traveling coat, expression unreadable. These letters, Eliza said, hand shaking as she held one up. Victoria's been planning this for years. She's been building a case against you since before your brother died. I know. You know? Then why didn't you tell me? Because it doesn't matter. He crossed to the desk, took the letters from her hand, locked them back in the drawer with careful precision. Victoria can say whatever she wants. The facts are on our side. Are they? Because these letters make you sound like a monster. Good thing we're not using them as evidence then. Dominic, if her lawyers have copies, they do. They'll present them in court. The judge will read them, and then our lawyers will present bank records showing I financially supported Victoria and her husband for 8 years. Medical records showing the extent of my brother's alcoholism. Testimony from Charlotte's previous doctor stating that the child showed signs of neglect under her mother's care. He sat down behind the desk, suddenly looking exhausted. Victoria's letters tell one story. The evidence tells another. The judge will have to decide which one is true. Eliza sank into a chair. Why didn't you tell me any of this? Because you didn't need to know. Your job is to be the stable presence, the suitable wife, not to understand the full depth of how ugly this is going to get. That's not fair. Fair doesn't matter. Winning matters. He leaned back, eyes closing briefly. In 8 days, we walk into that courtroom. Victoria's lawyers will tear me apart. They'll question your motives, your character, everything about our marriage. And Charlotte will have to sit through all of it, listening to her mother explain why I'm too dangerous to raise her. So yes, I kept things from you because you were already carrying enough. The anger drained out of Eliza, replaced by something heavier, understanding maybe, or just the crushing weight of how impossible this all was. I read the part about you watching Victoria, Eliza said quietly. About you frightening Charlotte. Is any of that true? Does it matter? Yes. Dominic opened his eyes, looked at her with an expression that held too many things to name. I tried to help them, he said finally. My brother was destroying himself and Victoria was trapped in it. I offered money, support, a way out. She refused, said she'd made her choice and would live with it. Then he died, and suddenly I was the villain in her story, instead of the man who tried to save them both. He paused. As for Charlotte being frightened, children are often frightened of people they don't understand. I'm not warm, I never have been, but I've never hurt that child. Never would. I believe you. You shouldn't. You barely know me. I know enough. Eliza stood. I know you're fighting for a little girl when giving up would be easier. I know you hired me instead of finding some society wife who'd look better on paper. I know you're exhausted and angry and probably terrified, even if you'd never admit it. That's enough. Something shifted in his face, not quite softening, but acknowledging. The hearing is in 8 days, he repeated. I need you ready. I will be. Promise me something. When they come after you, and they will, don't fight back. Don't defend yourself. Just stay calm. Answer their questions. Be perfect. There was that word again. Perfect. I'll try, Eliza said. Trying isn't enough. You have to be. He stood, moved toward the door. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we practice. Go through every question they might ask, every angle they might use. By the time we walk into that courtroom, you need to be unbreakable. He left. Eliza stayed in the library until the fire died and the cold crept in. Then she went upstairs, past Charlotte's room where Miss Pemberton had left a lamp burning low, past the Duchess's chambers to the small sitting room she'd claimed as her own. 8 days. That's all they had left. 8 days to become perfect. The week passed in a blur of preparation and growing dread. Dominic's lawyers came to the house, 2 of them, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued. They drilled Eliza on every possible question, pulled apart her history, her motivations, her relationship with Dominic, looked for weaknesses and found them everywhere. When did you first meet the Duke? At a ball, 3 weeks before we married. And he proposed that same night? Yes. That doesn't strike you as unusual, suspicious even? It struck me as decisive. Or desperate. Which was he, Mrs. Hale? Decisive or desperate? Both, probably, same as me. The lead lawyer, a man named Thornton with silver hair and no patience, frowned. That's not the answer we want. It's the truth. The truth is flexible. The truth is whatever we can prove. And right now, the truth we need to prove is that this marriage was based on genuine affection, not mutual desperation. He shuffled papers. Again. Why did you marry the Duke? They ran the questions 50 times, 100, until Eliza could answer in her sleep, until her responses were smooth, practiced, perfect. But perfection felt like lying. 2 days before the hearing, Victoria herself arrived. Eliza was in the garden with Charlotte when Mrs. Brennan came rushing out, face pale. Your Grace, there's a woman at the door. She claims, "Hello, darling." The voice came from behind Mrs. Brennan. A woman stepped around her, tall and elegant, with Charlotte's dark hair and eyes that held no warmth at all. She wore black, widow's weeds, though her husband had been dead nearly a year. The effect was calculated. Perfect grieving mother, costume and all. Charlotte's hand tightened in Eliza's. The little girl went rigid, all the progress of the past weeks vanishing in an instant. "Mama," she whispered, and it sounded like fear. "I've come to see my daughter," Victoria said, smiling at Charlotte with an expression that didn't reach her eyes. Surely no one would deny a mother that right. Eliza's mind raced. This was a trap, had to be. 2 days before the hearing, Victoria shows up unannounced, probably with witnesses hidden somewhere, ready to document how Eliza and Dominic tried to keep her from her child. "Of course not," Eliza said, keeping her voice steady. "Please, come in. I'll have tea brought to the drawing room." How civilized. Victoria's gaze swept over Eliza, assessing and dismissing in the same glance. "You must be the new wife. How fortunate my brother-in-law found someone so quickly, almost as if he'd been planning it." "Almost," Eliza agreed, refusing to take the bait. "Charlotte, why don't you show your mother the drawing you made yesterday, the one of the horses?" But Charlotte wouldn't move, wouldn't let go of Eliza's hand, just stood there, small and frozen, staring at her mother like she was something dangerous. "Charlotte?" Victoria's voice sharpened. "Come here, darling. Don't be rude." "She's not being rude," Eliza said quickly. "She's just surprised. Aren't you, Charlotte? We weren't expecting visitors today." "No, you weren't." Victoria's smile turned cold. "But then, you've gotten quite good at controlling who sees my daughter, haven't you? Limiting visits, changing staff. As if you have any right." "I have every right. I'm her legal guardian." "For now." Victoria moved closer, and Charlotte shrank back, pressing against Eliza's legs. "We'll see what the judge says about that." "About you. A desperate nobody who married for money and thinks that makes her a mother. I've never claimed to be her mother. That position is already filled, however inadequately." The words came out before Eliza could stop them. Victoria's face went pale with fury. "How dare you?" "I dare because someone has to." Eliza forced herself to stay calm, to remember Thornton's coaching, but anger made her reckless. "You abandoned your daughter, remarried while she was still grieving, and now you show up here, using her like a prop in whatever game you're playing. So yes, I dare, because Charlotte deserves better than this. Charlotte deserves her real family, not some fortune hunter playing house with a man everyone knows is dangerous." "Dangerous? Dominic's the only one who fought to keep her. Where were you when she needed comfort, when she cried herself to sleep? Where were you when—" "Stop it!" The small voice cut through the argument like a knife. Charlotte had pulled away from both of them, hands pressed over her ears, tears streaming down her face. "Stop fighting! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!" She ran, across the garden, through the door, disappearing into the house. Eliza started to follow, but Victoria caught her arm. "See what you've done? This is exactly what I'll tell the judge. How you've turned my daughter against me, made her afraid of her own mother." "She was already afraid of you," Eliza said, pulling free. "I didn't do that. You did. When you chose your new husband over her. When you decided custody was an inconvenience." "You know nothing about my choices." "I know enough." Eliza turned to face her fully. "I know you could have kept her, could have fought for her, but instead you tried to give her away, and only changed your mind when Dominic refused to make it easy. This isn't about Charlotte. This is about control, about winning." Victoria's expression shifted, became something colder, more calculated. "You're right about one thing," she said quietly. "This is about winning, and I always win." She stepped back, smoothing her dress. "I'll see you in court, Mrs. Hale. And when the judge sees what kind of household you're really running, the instability, the arguments, the fear in my daughter's eyes, he'll have no choice but to remove her from this place." She left. Eliza stood in the garden, shaking with anger and fear and the certain knowledge that she'd just ruined everything. Dominic found her there 20 minutes later. "Victoria was here," he said. Not a question. "Yes." "What happened?" Eliza told him. every word, every mistake. Watched his face close off as she spoke. Watched the careful control he'd maintained for weeks crack just slightly. "I told you to be perfect," he said when she finished. "I know." "I told you not to fight back, to stay calm." "I know." "And you did it anyway." He turned away from her, hands clenched. "Do you understand what you've done? She'll have witnesses, evidence that you're aggressive, unstable, everything we've worked for, gone because you couldn't control your temper." She was using Charlotte as a weapon. "So you thought you'd make it worse?" He spun back. "That girl just watched the two women in her life fight over her like she's property. How is that better?" "At least I fought for her. At least I didn't stand there and let Victoria tear her apart." "You fought for yourself, for your pride, not for Charlotte." The words hit like a slap. Eliza felt tears burning behind her eyes and refused to let them fall. "You're right," she said. "I'm not perfect. I never was. I tried to tell you that, but you wouldn't listen. So here we are. I've ruined your case, destroyed our chances, and proved that I'm exactly as unsuitable as everyone said." She pulled off her gloves, fingers shaking. "I'll leave tonight. You can tell the court whatever you need, that I was a mistake, that you're better off without me. At least that way you might still have a chance." She started toward the house. Dominic caught her arm. "Don't," he said. "Don't what? Don't leave? Don't make it easier for you? Don't give up." His grip tightened. "You made a mistake, fine. We'll deal with it. But if you leave now, we definitely lose. Charlotte definitely loses. Is that what you want?" "Of course not." "Then we fight. Together. No matter how bad it gets." He released her, stepped back. "The hearing is in 2 days. Victoria will use today against us. Our lawyers will do damage control. And you will walk into that courtroom and prove that what happened today was an aberration. That you're steady, reliable. Exactly what Charlotte needs." "How am I supposed to do that when everyone's already decided I'm not?" "By not caring what everyone thinks." For the first time, his expression softened slightly. "You defended Charlotte today, badly, recklessly, but you defended her. That matters more than perfection ever could. So stop trying to be what you think I need and start being what Charlotte actually needs. Someone who'll fight for her even when it's stupid, even when it costs everything." Eliza stared at him. "You're not angry?" "I'm furious, but not at you." He glanced toward the house. "Victoria played this perfectly. Showed up unannounced, provoked you, got exactly the reaction she wanted. She'll use it to paint you as unstable. But she made one mistake." "What?" "She underestimated you, thought you'd crumble under pressure. Instead, you fought back. That tells me something important." He met her eyes. "It tells me you're not pretending anymore. This isn't just an arrangement for you. You actually care about Charlotte." "Of course I do." "Then show them that. When we're in court, when they come after you, show them exactly what I saw today. Someone who loves that child enough to make stupid choices defending her." Before Eliza could respond, Miss Pemberton appeared in the doorway, Charlotte clinging to her hand. "She wants to talk to you," Miss Pemberton said quietly. "Both of you." They went inside. Charlotte sat on the sofa in the drawing room, small and pale, eyes red from crying. When they entered, she looked up at Eliza with an expression that broke something inside her chest. "I'm sorry," Charlotte whispered. "I'm sorry Mama came. I'm sorry I ran away." Eliza knelt in front of her. "You have nothing to apologize for." "But you and Mama were fighting because of me." "No, sweetheart. We were fighting because of choices your mother made. None of this is your fault. Do you understand? None of it." Charlotte's lower lip trembled. "Are you leaving, like Mama said you would?" "I'm not leaving." "Promise?" Eliza looked at Dominic, saw something in his face that might have been approval or trust, or maybe just exhaustion. "I promise," she said to Charlotte. "No matter what happens, I'm staying." Charlotte launched herself forward, small arms wrapping around Eliza's neck in a desperate hug. Eliza held her, feeling the little girl shake with silent sobs, and understood that this, right here, was what they were really fighting for. Not pride, not winning, just this small, scared child who needed someone to stay. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She paced her room until midnight, then gave up and went downstairs. Found Dominic in the library, surrounded by papers, a glass of whiskey at his elbow. "Can't sleep either?" he asked without looking up. "No." She sat down across from him. "Tell me the truth. What are our chances?" "Honestly, before today, maybe 60%. After Victoria's visit, probably 40. Maybe less." "Those aren't good odds." "No, they're not." He finally looked up. "But they're not zero, and I don't lose, Eliza. I told you that the night we met. I don't lose." "Everyone loses sometimes." "Not with her. I can't." He set down his pen, the careful control cracking just enough to show the fear underneath. "Charlotte's all I have left of my brother. He was an idiot and a drunk, and he made my sister-in-law's life hell, but he was still my brother. And when he died, he asked me to take care of his daughter, made me promise, so I can't lose this. I won't." It was the most honest he'd ever been with her. Eliza sat there, seeing him fully for the first time. Not the cold duke, not the ruthless strategist, just a man trying to keep a promise to someone he'd loved. "Then we won't lose," she said. "We'll walk into that courtroom and we'll fight. And whatever they throw at us, we'll survive it, together." Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Together," he repeated. 2 days later, they walked into court. The courtroom was smaller than Eliza expected. Older, wood-paneled and imposing, with windows that let in weak morning light. Victoria sat on one side with her lawyers, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, the grieving mother seeking justice. Eliza and Dominic sat on the other side. Charlotte was with Miss Pemberton in an antechamber, waiting to be called if needed. The judge entered, elderly, stern, with eyes that missed nothing. Victoria's lawyers went first, built their case with surgical precision, presented the letters, witness testimony from staff who'd been fired from Ashenhurst, evidence of Dominic's ruthless business practices, and finally, Victoria herself, tearful and trembling, explaining how she'd been forced to give up her daughter to a man who frightened her. "He threatened me," she said, dabbing at tears. "Told me he'd destroy me if I fought him. I had no choice. I had to let Charlotte go." Eliza's hands clenched beneath the table. Dominic sat perfectly still, face carved from stone. Then it was their turn. Thornton presented bank records, medical documentation, testimony from Charlotte's doctor about the neglect. It was clinical, factual, devastating in its own way, but the judge's expression didn't change. Finally, he called Eliza to the stand. She walked up on shaking legs, swore to tell the truth, sat down beneath the weight of every eye in the room. Victoria's lawyer stood, smiled like a shark. "Mrs. Hale," he began, "you married the Duke of Ashenhurst after knowing him for how long?" 3 weeks. 3 weeks. How romantic. Tell me what attracted you to such a wealthy, powerful man. "Objection," Thornton said. "Relevance." "Your Honor, the question goes to motive. This woman married my client's brother-in-law under suspicious circumstances. The court has a right to understand why." "I'll allow it," the judge said. "Answer the question, Mrs. Hale." Eliza took a breath, remembered Thornton's coaching, be perfect, be calm. But when she spoke, it wasn't the practiced answer. It was the truth. "I married him because we needed each other," she said. "He needed a wife to help him keep Charlotte. I needed a way out of a life that was suffocating me. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was two desperate people making a choice." Silence in the courtroom. Thornton's face went white. "So you admit this was a marriage of convenience?" Victoria's lawyer pressed. "I admit it started that way. But it's not that anymore." "Oh? And when did it change? Yesterday? Last week? Conveniently before this hearing?" "It changed when I met Charlotte, when I saw what she needed, when I understood that this wasn't about saving myself anymore. It was about saving her." "How noble. And yet, just 2 days ago, witnesses observed you having a violent argument with my client, shouting, making accusations, traumatizing young Charlotte in the process. Does that sound like someone stable, someone suitable to raise a child?" Eliza's throat tightened. This was it. The trap. The moment everything fell apart. She looked at Dominic. He nodded slightly. "Fight," his expression said. "Show them who you are." Yes, I argued with Mrs. Harrison, Eliza said, because she showed up unannounced, used her daughter as a prop in whatever game she's playing, and made that little girl cry. So I fought back. Was it perfect? No. Was it smart? Probably not. But I'll be damned if I apologize for defending a child who deserves better than being fought over like property. Language, Mrs. Hale, the judge warned. Apologies, Your Honor. Eliza didn't look away from the lawyer. But my point stands. I'm not perfect. I never claim to be. I'm just someone who's trying to give Charlotte what she needs. Stability, safety, someone who won't abandon her when it's inconvenient. Victoria's lawyer smiled. And yet, you just admitted this marriage is a sham, a business arrangement. How is that stable? Because we're making it real, Eliza said. Day by day, choice by choice. We're building something that started as strategy but became family. And if you can't see that, then you're not paying attention. The lawyer opened his mouth to respond, but the judge held up a hand. I think I've heard enough, he said. I'd like to speak with the child. Bring her in. Charlotte entered the courtroom holding Miss Pemberton's hand, eyes wide with fear. She saw her mother and froze. Saw Dominic and Eliza and relaxed fractionally. The judge called her forward, spoke to her gently, asking simple questions. Who did she live with? Who took care of her? Where did she feel safe? Charlotte answered in whispers, but every answer pointed toward Ashenhurst, toward Dominic and Eliza and the home they'd built. And your mother? The judge asked. Do you want to live with her? Charlotte looked at Victoria, then at Eliza, her small face crumpled. I want to stay with Uncle Dominic, she whispered, and Aunt Eliza, please don't make me leave, please. She started to cry, real, desperate sobs. And Eliza watched Victoria's face, saw the exact moment the woman realized she'd lost. Because Charlotte's tears were real, her fear was real, and no amount of legal maneuvering could hide that. The judge called for recess. Everyone filed out except Dominic and Eliza, sitting in the empty courtroom, waiting. That was either brilliant or we're completely ruined, Dominic said quietly. I know, Eliza replied. They sat there in silence until the judge returned. When he did, his expression was unreadable. I've made my decision, he said. The judge's voice cut through the silence like a blade through water. Custody will remain with the Duke of Ashenhurst. The words took a moment to land. Eliza heard them, processed them, but couldn't quite believe them. Beside her, Dominic went perfectly still, not even breathing. Your Honor, Victoria's lawyer was on his feet immediately. I'm not finished. The judge's expression was stern. I've reviewed all the evidence presented, the letters, the testimony, the financial records, and I've spoken with the child herself. What's clear to me is that Charlotte has found stability in her uncle's household. She's thriving under the care of the Duke and Duchess of Ashenhurst. While Mrs. Harrison's concerns about her former brother-in-law's temperament are noted, they are not substantiated by current evidence. But the marriage, the suspicious timing, the lawyer tried again, is legal and, by all accounts I've seen today, genuine enough where it matters. The judge looked directly at Eliza. Mrs. Hale's testimony was refreshingly honest. Imperfect, yes, but honest. And her commitment to the child is evident, as is the child's attachment to her. Victoria stood, face pale with fury. This is outrageous. That man threatened me. Mrs. Harrison, you will sit down and be silent, or I will hold you in contempt. The judge's voice was ice. You had every opportunity to maintain custody of your daughter. You chose instead to remarry and attempt to place the child with your brother-in-law, only filing for custody when he refused to make that arrangement convenient for you. The court does not look favorably on parents who treat their children as negotiable inconveniences. The words landed like physical blows. Victoria sank back into her chair, her lawyer's hand on her arm, the only thing keeping her upright. Custody remains with the Duke and Duchess of Ashenhurst, the judge repeated. Mrs. Harrison will be granted supervised visitation rights, no more than once monthly, at a location to be determined by the guardians. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Eliza sat frozen, unable to move. They'd won. Somehow, impossibly, they'd won. Dominic's hand found hers under the table. His fingers were shaking, just slightly, but enough that she could feel it. We need to get Charlotte, he said quietly. before Victoria tries something. They stood. Across the courtroom, Victoria was arguing with her lawyers, her voice rising in sharp, angry bursts. Her new husband, a thin man with nervous eyes, was trying to calm her down, but she shoved him away. "This isn't over," she called across the room. "You think you've won? You've won nothing. That child will never love you, never trust you. You're a monster, Dominic, and she'll figure that out eventually." "We're leaving," Dominic said, not even looking at her. He guided Eliza toward the door where Thornton was already waiting with Charlotte and Miss Pemberton. The little girl broke free the moment she saw them, running across the hall and throwing herself at Eliza with enough force to nearly knock her over. "We're going home?" Charlotte asked, voice muffled against Eliza's dress. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going home." "And Mama can't take me away?" Eliza knelt down, bringing herself to Charlotte's level. "No one's taking you away. You're staying with us. That's what the judge decided." Charlotte's face crumpled, not with sadness, but with relief so profound it looked painful. She wrapped her arms around Eliza's neck and held on like she was afraid of falling. Behind them, Victoria's voice echoed down the corridor. "This isn't over." But it was. The judge's decision was final. Charlotte was theirs. The ride back to Ashenhurst was quiet. Charlotte fell asleep against Eliza's shoulder, exhausted from the day's emotions. Miss Pemberton sat across from them, hands folded, wearing an expression of satisfaction that suggested she'd never doubted the outcome for a moment. Dominic stared out the window, face unreadable. "You're quiet," Eliza said softly, trying not to wake Charlotte. "I'm thinking." "About what?" "About how close we came to losing." He finally looked at her. "If you hadn't been honest on that stand, if you'd given them the perfect, practiced answers Thornton coached, I think we would have lost. Thornton's going to have my head for ignoring his advice. Thornton can complain all he wants. You saved us." He paused. "Thank you." The words were simple, but coming from Dominic, they felt like a victory all their own. When they arrived at Ashenhurst, the staff was waiting. Someone had clearly sent word ahead. Mrs. Brennan stood in the entrance hall, her expression less severe than usual. Behind her, Mary and the other servants lined up like soldiers waiting for inspection. "Welcome home, Your Grace," Mrs. Brennan said to Eliza, and for the first time the title sounded like it belonged. "Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. Cook has prepared dinner, and we've had Charlotte's room freshened. Everything's ready." The housekeeper's gaze moved to Charlotte, still half asleep in Eliza's arms. "Welcome home, Miss Charlotte." Charlotte lifted her head, looked around at the assembled staff, and for the first time in weeks, smiled. That night, after Charlotte had been fed and bathed and tucked into bed with 3 stories and a promise that Eliza would check on her before sleeping, Eliza found Dominic in the library. He was standing by the window, glass of whiskey in hand, staring out at the darkened grounds. "She's asleep," Eliza said. "Good." He didn't turn. "How is she?" "Happy? Relieved? Asking questions about whether she'll have to see her mother again." "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that she'll visit sometimes, but only when she's ready, and only with us there." Eliza moved closer. "Dominic, we need to talk about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "I mean we won custody. The immediate crisis is over. So what does that mean for us? For this arrangement?" Now he did turn. His expression was carefully neutral. "What do you want it to mean?" "I'm asking what you want." "That's not an answer." Eliza took a breath. "I know what we agreed to. A marriage of convenience, strategic alliance, but things have changed. Charlotte's not the only one who's gotten attached. Haven't we?" She moved closer, close enough to see the exhaustion in his face, the careful control starting to crack. "This stopped being pretend somewhere along the way. At least for me. And I think for you too, even if you won't admit it." Silence stretched between them. Dominic set down his glass with careful precision. "You're right," he said finally. "This stopped being pretend. But that doesn't mean it's simple or easy." I never expected simple." "You should have." He turned away again. "I told you I don't do warmth, don't do affection well. That hasn't changed." "I'm not asking you to change. I'm asking you to be honest about what this is now, what we are." "And what are we, Eliza?" A family. The word came out stronger than she expected. Maybe not a conventional one, maybe not what either of us planned, but a family nonetheless. And I think we owe it to ourselves, to Charlotte, to stop pretending otherwise. Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. A family, he repeated, testing the word. All right, then we'll be that. Unconventional and complicated and probably destined to drive each other insane. But a family, Eliza smiled. I can live with that. Can you? Because it won't be easy. Victoria's not going to disappear quietly. Society's going to keep questioning us, and I'm still not good at this. Neither am I. We'll figure it out together. She paused. That's what families do, isn't it? Figure things out as they go? I wouldn't know. My family wasn't particularly good at it. Then we'll be better. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close enough. The next morning brought the first test of their new reality. An invitation arrived from Lady Ashford, the same woman who'd hosted the disastrous dinner. This time, it was for a garden party, and this time, it came with a note. My dear Duchess, I hope you'll forgive my previous rudeness. We were all quite concerned about dear Charlotte's situation, but now that the courts have settled matters, I hope we can start fresh. Do say you'll come. Society is terribly eager to welcome you properly. Eliza read the note twice, looking for the trap. She's covering her tracks, Dominic said when she showed him. We won. Now everyone who sided with Victoria is scrambling to align with us instead. So we go and let them grovel. We go and let them think they're being gracious and accepting us. He took the invitation, examined it with clinical detachment. Politics. Tedious, but necessary. I hate politics. So do I. Unfortunately, we live in a world run by them. He set down the invitation. We'll attend, make an appearance, show them Charlotte's thriving, and then we leave before anyone can manufacture new drama. The garden party was exactly as insufferable as expected. The same people who'd whispered about Eliza weeks ago now rushed to welcome her, each one more effusive than the last. Lady Ashford herself was practically glowing with false warmth. Your Grace, how wonderful to see you, and looking so well. Marriage clearly agrees with you. Thank you, Lady Ashford. Eliza kept her smile neutral. Your garden is lovely this time of year. Isn't it? We've been so blessed with weather. Lady Ashford lowered her voice conspiratorially. I do hope you'll forgive my concern at our previous meeting. We were all so worried about dear Charlotte, but I can see now that she's in excellent hands. Translation. I backed the wrong side and now I'm trying to save face. Charlotte is very well, thank you for asking. I'm so pleased to hear it. You must bring her by sometime. The children would love to meet her. The children who'd be instructed to report back every detail, Eliza thought, but she smiled and nodded and made vague promises. Across the garden, Dominic was engaged in similar performances with a group of gentlemen who'd probably spent the past month calling him dangerous. Now they laughed at his dry observations and agreed with every word. It was exhausting. Watching everyone pretend the past weeks hadn't happened, pretend they'd been supportive all along. They're pathetic, aren't they? Eliza turned to find a woman she didn't recognize, younger than most of the guests, with sharp eyes and a knowing smile. I'm sorry? All of them, falling over themselves to align with power now that the tide's turned. The woman extended her hand. Catherine Winters. We haven't been formally introduced, but I've been watching you. You're more interesting than anyone gives you credit for. Eliza shook her hand cautiously. I'm not sure that's a compliment. It's an observation. Most of these people are dull as dishwater. You, on the other hand, stood up in court and told the truth instead of playing it safe. That takes spine. Catherine glanced around at the assembled guests. Half these women would have crumbled under that kind of scrutiny. The other half would have lied so smoothly the judge would never have known. But you did neither. You were honest, imperfect, human. You make it sound like that's unusual. In this world, it's practically revolutionary. Catherine lowered her voice. Fair warning, they're going to test you, push boundaries. See if you're really as formidable as you appeared in that courtroom. Don't let them intimidate you. I'll try not to. Good. Catherine smiled. I have a feeling we're going to be friends, Duchess. whether you want to be or not." She walked away before Eliza could respond, leaving her with the distinct impression that she'd just been adopted by someone who didn't ask permission for anything. The party dragged on for another hour before Dominic finally extracted them, making polite excuses about Charlotte needing dinner. They rode home in comfortable silence, both exhausted from performing. "That woman Catherine cornered me," Eliza said. "Told me I was interesting. Is that normal?" "Catherine Winters doesn't care about normal. She's a widow, independently wealthy, and has absolutely no patience for society's rules." Dominic's mouth twitched. "If she's decided you're interesting, you're either very fortunate or very doomed, possibly both." "Wonderful. She's right, though. You are interesting. Most duchesses would have played that party perfectly, smiled and nodded and said nothing memorable. You looked like you were contemplating murder the entire time." "I wasn't contemplating murder." "Liar." Eliza laughed despite herself. "Fine, maybe a little murder." Lady Ashford's face when she pretended to have been supportive all along. I wanted to throw tea at her. "Next time, do it. At least it would be entertaining." The casual encouragement caught her off guard. This version of Dominic, slightly amused, almost relaxed, was new. She liked it. Over the next few weeks, something shifted at Ashenhurst. The house itself seemed to warm, as if the victory in court had broken whatever cold spell had held it, or maybe Eliza was just finally seeing it differently. Charlotte bloomed. That was the only word for it. The quiet, careful child began to emerge as someone braver. She laughed more, asked questions instead of staying silent, started testing boundaries in the way healthy children did. "Can I have another biscuit? May I stay up later tonight? Why do I have to practice piano if I hate it?" Each question was a small rebellion, a tiny assertion of self. Eliza and Miss Pemberton handled them with patience, setting boundaries while encouraging the independence. "You can have one more biscuit, but that's all before dinner. You may stay up 15 minutes later, but then it's bed without argument. You have to practice piano because you committed to lessons, but if you still hate it in 6 months, we'll discuss other instruments." Charlotte tested. They held firm, and slowly she began to trust that the boundaries weren't punishment. They were safety. One afternoon, Eliza found Charlotte in the library, carefully paging through a book that was far too advanced for her reading level. "What are you looking at?" Eliza asked. "Pictures of places?" Charlotte held up the book, showing an illustration of mountains. "Miss Pemberton says the world is bigger than just here. I want to see it someday." "I think that's a wonderful goal. Will you come with me when I'm grown up and can travel?" The question was so earnest, so full of trust, that Eliza's throat tightened. "If you still want me there, absolutely." "I'll always want you there." Charlotte looked down at the book. "You didn't leave, even when Mama said you would, even when it was scary. You stayed." "I'll always stay, Charlotte. That's a promise." The little girl nodded seriously, accepting this as fact. Then she went back to her pictures, secure in the knowledge that her world was finally stable. That evening, Eliza told Dominic about the conversation. "She's starting to believe it's permanent," Eliza said. They were in the library, their unofficial meeting place at day's end. "That we're not going anywhere." "Good. That's what she needs." "What about what we need?" The question came out before Eliza could think better of it. Dominic looked up from his correspondence. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we've spent weeks building this for Charlotte, making sure she feels secure. But what about us? What do we need from each other?" He set down his pen. "I don't know how to answer that." "Try." Long silence. Then, "I need you to be patient with me. I'm not good at this, at letting people in, at trusting that they won't leave or betray or prove themselves unreliable." He paused. "But you've been none of those things, so I'm trying, poorly, probably, but trying." "That's all I'm asking." Eliza moved closer to his desk. "I need you to be honest with me. Not the practice speeches, not the careful control, just honest, even when it's difficult." "I can do that." "Can you? Because you still haven't told me what happened with your brother. Why you and Victoria really hate each other. Why you're so certain Charlotte needs to be here instead of with her mother." Dominic's expression shuddered. "That's not relevant? Fair? My business? Eliza cut him off. We're family now, Dominic. You said so yourself. Family means trusting each other with the ugly truths, not just the convenient ones. He stood, paced to the window. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. My brother was a drunk. You know that part. What you don't know is that he was also cruel. Not physically. He never hit Victoria or Charlotte, but words can damage just as badly. He'd tear Victoria apart verbally, then apologize and promise to change. The cycle repeated for years. And you tried to help. I tried everything. Offered money to get him treatment, offered to take Charlotte while he recovered, offered Victoria a way out if she wanted it. She refused every time, said she'd made vows, that she could handle it, that I was interfering. So she blamed you instead of him. So she blamed everyone. Me for trying to help, him for needing it, herself for staying. By the time he died, the resentment had calcified into something permanent. He turned from the window. Charlotte witnessed things no child should see, heard things that scared her, and Victoria was so busy surviving her marriage that she couldn't protect her daughter from it. So yes, I'm certain Charlotte belongs here, because here, she doesn't have to be afraid. The honesty in his voice was raw, painful, everything he usually kept buried. Thank you, Eliza said quietly, for trusting me with that. It doesn't change anything. It changes everything. It means I understand now why you fight so hard, why you won't let go. Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Then he crossed the room, stopping close enough that Eliza could see the exhaustion in his eyes. I don't know how to do this, he said. How to be a husband in anything other than name. How to be someone you might actually want instead of someone you settled for. You're not someone I settled for, aren't I? You married me to escape. I married you for convenience. That's not exactly a foundation for anything real. Then we'll build a new foundation. Eliza reached for his hand. He let her take it, his fingers warm against hers. Starting now, starting honest. Honest, he repeated. Then quietly, I'm glad you stayed. That night in the garden. I'm glad you chose this. So am I. It wasn't a declaration of love, wasn't poetry or romance, but it was real. And for now, real was enough. The following week brought Victoria's first supervised visitation. She arrived at Ashenhurst precisely on time, dressed in subdued colors, her new husband trailing behind like an afterthought. Charlotte hid behind Eliza's skirts when they entered the drawing room. Hello, darling, Victoria said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Don't you look well? Charlotte said nothing. The visitation is for 1 hour, Dominic said, his tone making it clear this was non-negotiable. Miss Pemberton will remain in the room the entire time. If Charlotte becomes distressed, the visit ends immediately. How lovely. You've turned my own daughter against me and now I need a chaperone to see her. Victoria's voice was bitter. This is exactly what I warned the judge about. The judge made his decision. You can accept it or you can leave. Victoria's mouth thinned, but she sat down, gestured to the chair across from her. Come sit with me, Charlotte. Tell me about your lessons. The hour was painful. Charlotte answered her mother's questions in monosyllables, her body language screaming discomfort. Victoria tried. Eliza had to give her that. She asked about Charlotte's favorite things, her studies, her daily routine, but every question felt like an interrogation, and Charlotte's answers were guarded. When the hour ended, Charlotte bolted from the room without saying goodbye. This is your fault, Victoria said, standing. You've poisoned her against me. We've done nothing except give her stability, Eliza replied. If she's uncomfortable with you, perhaps you should ask yourself why. I know exactly why. Because you've replaced me. Played the doting mother while I was painted as the villain. Victoria gathered her things, her movements sharp with anger. But children grow up, Mrs. Hale. They remember. And someday Charlotte will ask why her real mother wasn't there. What will you tell her then? The truth. That her mother had choices and made the ones that served her best. Just like we all do. Victoria's face went white. She left without another word, her husband scurrying after her. That went well, Dominic said dryly. She's angry. She's losing. Angry is what happens when people like Victoria lose. Eliza found Charlotte in a room, curled up with a book, trying to pretend she wasn't upset. That was hard, Eliza said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Charlotte nodded without looking up. You don't have to pretend it wasn't. It's okay to feel confused about seeing your mother. I don't like her anymore. The words came out small and guilty. Is that bad? No, sweetheart. It's honest, and honest is never bad. But she's my mama. I'm supposed to love her. You can love someone and still not like them very much. Feelings are complicated like that. Eliza brushed hair back from Charlotte's face. What matters is that you're safe, that you're here, and that we love you no matter what you feel about anyone else. Charlotte finally looked up. Do you love me? The question knocked the breath from Eliza's lungs. Yes, she said. Very much. Even though I'm not yours? You are mine. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. And choice is stronger than blood any day. Charlotte threw her arms around Eliza's neck, holding tight. I love you too, she whispered. More than Mama. Is that wrong? No, darling, it's not wrong at all. That night, Eliza told Dominic what Charlotte had said. She said she loves you, he repeated as if testing the words. She said she loves me more than Victoria and felt guilty about it. What did you tell her? That feelings are complicated, that it's okay. Eliza paused. Do you think I handled it right? I think you handled it perfectly. He looked at her steadily. She's lucky to have you. We both are. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither quite knew how to address. Dominic, I know, we're not good at this, but we're trying. That has to count for something. Eliza smiled. It counts for everything. 2 months after the court decision, Catherine Winters appeared at Ashenhurst unannounced, exactly the way Dominic had predicted she would. I've decided we're friends now, she declared, sweeping past Mrs. Brennan without waiting for permission. So I'm here to collect you for tea. The real kind, not the performing for society kind. I'm not sure I'm available, Eliza began. You are now. Come on. Your husband can spare you for an afternoon, and that delightful child of yours has lessons. Eliza glanced at Dominic, who'd emerged from his study looking resigned. You might as well go, he said. Catherine doesn't take no for an answer. Smart man. Catherine linked her arm through Eliza's. We'll be back by dinner, probably. They ended up at Catherine's estate, a sprawling place that somehow managed to be both elegant and comfortable. The tea was real, no performance required. I'm going to be honest with you, Catherine said, pouring, because dishonesty is tedious, and we're both too old for it. You've been the talk of society for 2 months. Half of them think you're a fortune hunter who got lucky. The other half think you're either brilliantly strategic or genuinely in love. Nobody can decide which. What do you think? I think you're surviving, same as the rest of us. The difference is you're doing it honestly instead of hiding behind propriety. Catherine handed her a cup. I like that. It's refreshing. Refreshing is one word for it. The other words are terrifying and admirable. You took on Victoria Harrison and won. Do you understand how rare that is? That woman has destroyed social careers with less effort than it takes to drink tea. But you stood in court and told the truth, and the judge respected you for it. I didn't have much choice. Everyone has choices. You made the brave ones. Catherine set down her cup. Here's what I want to know. What happens now? You've got custody. You've got the Duke. You've proven you can survive society's scrutiny. So what comes next? Eliza hadn't thought that far ahead. The past months had been about survival, keeping Charlotte, maintaining the marriage, establishing themselves. But Catherine was right. They'd won. Now what? I don't know, she admitted. Then figure it out. Because women like us don't get to coast. We have to keep building, keep proving ourselves, keep fighting for the space we've claimed. Catherine leaned forward. You have power now, Eliza. Real power. The question is what you're going to do with it. The words stayed with Eliza all the way home. What was she going to do with it? She found her answer 3 days later when a letter arrived from her mother. The handwriting was shaky, the paper cheap. Margaret Whitmore hadn't written since Eliza's wedding, a silence that had spoken volumes. Now, suddenly, she wanted to reconnect. Eliza read the letter twice, looking for the angle, found it in the final paragraph. Your father's debts have become unmanageable. The house will be sold within the month. I don't ask for charity, but if you could see your way to helping your family in this difficult time, it would be deeply appreciated. Translation: give us money or watch us fall. Eliza's first instinct was to burn the letter. Her mother had made her childhood miserable, had pushed her into corners and called her a disappointment and treated her like a commodity to be traded for social standing. But she didn't burn it. Instead, she showed it to Dominic. He read it without expression. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to let them fail. They never helped me. And the other part? Knows they're still my family, however terrible they were. She took back the letter. What would you do? I'd let them fail, but I'm not known for my compassion. Despite everything, Eliza smiled. No, you're not. She thought about it for 2 days. Then she made her decision. The letter she sent back was short. I'll pay off Father's debts and purchase the house. You may continue living there rent-free. In exchange, I never want to hear from you again unless it's to acknowledge how wrong you were about me. Consider this the last kindness you'll receive from the daughter you called worthless. Dominic read it when she showed him. That's cruel. It's honest, and it's more than they deserve. She sealed the letter. Power, Catherine said. I have it now. So I'm using it, not to save them, to prove they were wrong. He looked at her with something close to approval. I'm starting to understand why the judge believed you. Because I'm stubborn? Because you're strong. There's a difference. That night, for the first time since their wedding, Dominic knocked on Eliza's door instead of staying in his own chambers. She answered in her dressing gown, surprised. Is something wrong? No, I just, He stopped, started again. I wanted to tell you something. All right. When I asked you to marry me, I thought I was hiring someone to play a role, fill a need, help me keep Charlotte. I didn't expect... He paused. I didn't expect you to become someone I actually needed. Not for the custody case, for myself. The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Dominic, I'm not good at this, at saying things. But I wanted you to know that what we have now, it's not what I planned, but it's better. And I don't want it to go back to being an arrangement. Eliza's heart was hammering. What do you want it to be? Real. Complicated and messy and real. He met her eyes. If that's something you want too. She stepped forward, took his hand. I want that. I've wanted it for a while now. Good. He exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath. Then we'll do that. Be real. Whatever that means. It means we keep trying, keep being honest, keep building this. I can do that. Eliza pulled him inside, closed the door. They didn't have all the answers, didn't know how to navigate this new territory, but they had time, and they had each other. For the first time since the night in the garden, that felt like enough. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through curtains Eliza had forgotten to close. She woke in her own bed, alone, but the pillow beside her still held the impression of where Dominic had slept before slipping back to his own rooms before the staff woke. Small steps, careful ones, but steps nonetheless. She found him at breakfast, reading correspondence with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. Charlotte sat beside him, attempting to copy his posture while eating toast with jam that was slowly migrating from plate to face. Good morning, Eliza said. Dominic looked up. Something passed between them, acknowledgement of what had shifted the night before. Not everything, not even close to everything, but enough. Morning, he said. Then to Charlotte, you have jam on your nose. Charlotte wiped at it, spreading it further. Uncle Dominic, can we go riding today? Miss Pemberton said you used to have horses. We still have horses, you've just never asked to see them. I'm asking now. Charlotte fixed him with those serious eyes. Please? Dominic glanced at Eliza. She nodded slightly. After your lessons, he said. If Miss Pemberton agrees you've worked hard enough. Charlotte beamed, jam-covered face and all, and went back to her toast with renewed enthusiasm. The routine had become comfortable. Breakfast together. Charlotte's lessons while Eliza managed household affairs and Dominic handled business. Afternoon tea, dinner as a family. Small rituals that built structure around their unconventional arrangement, but comfort made people careless. And 3 months after the custody hearing, Victoria struck again. The letter came via lawyer, not directly. A petition to modify the custody arrangement. New evidence, it claimed. Witness testimony about the Duke's increasingly erratic behavior. Concerns about Mrs. Hale's suitability, given her family's continued financial disgrace. A request for expanded visitation with the ultimate goal of shared custody. Dominic read it twice, his expression going colder with each word. "She can't do this," Eliza said. "The judge already decided. She can petition for modification if circumstances have changed, or if she can convince the court circumstances have changed." He set down the letter. "She's claiming I'm unstable, that you're unsuitable, that Charlotte's being damaged by living here." Based on what evidence? According to this, testimony from former staff, observations from her monthly visits, and statements from concerned members of society who've witnessed our family's dysfunction. He stood, paced to the window. "It's lies. All of it. But lies told convincingly enough can be as damaging as truth." Eliza's hands clenched. "What do we do?" "We fight. Again. Same as before." "Can we win?" "I don't know." The admission cost him. Before, we had surprise on our side. Victoria underestimated us. She won't make that mistake twice. The preliminary hearing was set for 3 weeks out, just long enough to panic, not long enough to prepare properly. Thornton arrived within days, looking grim. "She's playing dirty," he said, spreading papers across Dominic's desk. "She's got testimony from Mrs. Davies claiming Charlotte was terrified of the Duke, statements from staff you've dismissed claiming hostile working conditions, and she's found someone willing to swear they witnessed you and Mrs. Hale having violent arguments in public." "That's a lie," Eliza said. "We've never—" "Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if it's believable." Thornton pulled out another document. "She's also claiming your family's financial scandal reflects poorly on your judgment, that your father's debts and your mother's social disgrace make you an unsuitable influence." "I paid those debts. Bought the house. My parents have nothing to do with Charlotte." "In your mind, perhaps? In a courtroom, everything's connected." Thornton looked at Dominic. "She's building a narrative. Unstable Duke, unsuitable Duchess, child caught in the middle. If she can make the judge doubt your stability, she wins. Then we prove we're stable. How? By parading Charlotte in front of the court again? Making her testify about her home life? That child's been through enough." Dominic's jaw tightened. "I won't let Victoria use her as a weapon again." "Then we need another strategy." Thornton gathered his papers. "I'll start building our defense, but I need you both to be beyond reproach for the next 3 weeks. No public arguments, no questionable decisions, nothing Victoria can use against you." After he left, Eliza and Dominic sat in heavy silence. "She's going to win," Eliza said quietly. "Isn't she?" "Not if I can help it." "But you heard Thornton. She's got witnesses, evidence, a narrative that makes us look exactly as unsuitable as she claims." "Then we changed the narrative." Dominic stood, moved to his desk, started pulling out files. "Victoria thinks she knows us, thinks she can predict our moves, so we do something she won't expect." "Like what?" He looked up, expression sharp with determination. "We go on the offensive, stop defending ourselves, and start exposing her." Over the next week, Dominic worked with an intensity Eliza had never seen. He hired investigators, dug through financial records, called in favors from people Eliza didn't know he had connections to. Whatever he was planning, he was doing it with the single-minded focus that had built his fortune. "You need to trust me," he said when Eliza asked what he was doing. "And you need to keep Charlotte stable. Don't let her see us worried." Keeping Charlotte stable proved harder than expected. The little girl was perceptive. She noticed the tension, the late-night meetings, the way Eliza and Dominic would stop talking when she entered a room. "Is Mama trying to take me away again?" she asked one afternoon during tea. Miss Pemberton's hand paused mid-pour. Eliza forced herself to stay calm. "Your mother is asking to see you more often," she said carefully. "But no one's taking you anywhere. You're staying here." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure we're going to fight for you, just like we did before." Charlotte stirred her tea with careful precision. What if you lose this time? The question hit like a physical blow. Eliza knelt beside Charlotte's chair. We won't lose. But even if we did, even if somehow the worst happened, you would still be loved, still be safe. That doesn't change. But I want to stay here, with you and Uncle Dominic. This is my home. I know, sweetheart, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure you stay. Charlotte nodded, but fear lingered in her eyes. That night, she had nightmares. Eliza woke to her screaming, ran to her room to find her sobbing about being taken away. I don't want to go. Please don't make me go. No one's making you go anywhere, Eliza said, holding her close. You're safe. I promise. But promises felt fragile when Victoria had lawyers and witnesses and a court system that might decide fear looked like evidence. Dominic found them like that. Charlotte finally asleep in Eliza's arms, both of them in the rocking chair by the window. He stood in the doorway watching. How long has she been having nightmares? He asked quietly. This is the third night. We need to end this quickly, before it damages her further. I thought that's what you were working on. It is, and I think I've found something. He stepped into the room, keeping his voice low. Victoria's new husband. He's got debts, significant ones, and he's been pressuring Victoria to secure more money from Charlotte's trust fund. Eliza stared at him. She's doing this for money? Not entirely, but it's part of it. The trust fund can't be touched without court approval, which she won't get as long as I have custody. But if she can claim the money's needed for Charlotte's care, she could access it. Exactly. So this isn't just about getting her daughter back. It's about getting access to funds she can't otherwise touch. He looked at Charlotte, sleeping peacefully now. If we can prove that in court, prove her motives aren't about Charlotte's welfare, we win. We might. It's not guaranteed, but it's something. The preliminary hearing came too quickly. Eliza dressed with shaking hands, choosing the most severe Duchess-appropriate outfit she owned, armor disguised as silk and propriety. Dominic was already waiting downstairs, dark suit making him look even more formidable than usual. Mrs. Brennan had Charlotte occupied in the kitchen, making biscuits, a distraction to keep her from seeing them leave. Ready? Dominic asked. No, but that doesn't matter. The courtroom was smaller this time, just the lawyers, the judge, Eliza and Dominic and Victoria, and her nervous husband. The atmosphere was tense, formal, thick with unspoken hostility. Victoria's lawyer went first, presenting the new evidence with smooth confidence. The testimony from Mrs. Davies painted Dominic as cold, controlling, frightening to a small child. The dismissed staff claimed hostile conditions, verbal abuse, an environment unsuitable for anyone, let alone a traumatized girl. And the arguments witnessed in public? The judge asked. Multiple witnesses placed the Duke and Duchess having heated confrontations at Lady Ashford's garden party. Raised voices, visible anger, hardly the stable environment a child needs. Eliza wanted to object. They'd never argued at that party, had barely spoken beyond polite necessity. But the lie was told so smoothly, backed by unnamed witnesses who weren't even present to cross-examine. Then Victoria's husband took the stand. I'm concerned for Charlotte's welfare, he said, hands clasped earnestly. My wife is devastated by the separation from her daughter. The financial strain of fighting for custody has been significant, but we believe Charlotte deserves to be with her mother. Financial strain, Dominic's lawyer repeated when given the chance to cross-examine. Interesting. Can you elaborate on that? Well, legal fees are expensive, and we want what's best for Charlotte, regardless of cost. Of course. And Charlotte's trust fund, you're aware of its existence? The husband's expression flickered. I believe there is a fund, yes. A fund worth approximately £50,000, held in trust for Charlotte's future, currently managed by the Duke of Ashenhurst as her guardian. If you say so. I do say so, just as I say that you, Mr. Harrison, have debts totaling nearly £30,000. Gambling debts, primarily, owed to some rather unpleasant creditors. Victoria's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. Mr. Harrison's personal finances are not relevant. They're extremely relevant if this petition is motivated by financial gain rather than genuine concern for the child. Dominic's lawyer turned back to the husband. Isn't it true that you've been pressuring your wife to gain access to Charlotte's trust fund? That's absurd. Is it? Because I have testimony from your creditors stating you promised them payment within 6 months, once your wife secured custody and access to the child's funds. The courtroom went silent. Victoria's face drained of color. Her husband looked like he wanted to disappear. The judge leaned forward. Is this true, Mr. Harrison? The debts are real, but we genuinely care about Charlotte. You care about £50,000, the lawyer cut in, and you saw a traumatized child as a means to accessing it. Victoria stood. Your Honor, this is a mischaracterization. Yes, my husband has debts, but that has nothing to do with wanting my daughter back. She's my child. I love her. You abandoned her, Eliza said. The words came out before she could stop them. Every head turned toward her. Thornton looked horrified. The judge frowned. Mrs. Hale, you're not— I know I'm not on the stand. I know I should be quiet, but I can't sit here and listen to this woman claim she loves a child she's been using as leverage. Eliza stood, hands shaking but voice steady. You didn't want Charlotte after your husband died. You remarried within months and tried to make her someone else's problem. The only reason you're here now is because Dominic wouldn't make it convenient for you. And now your new husband's debts are forcing your hand, so suddenly you're the devoted mother who's been wronged. That's not true, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then why didn't you fight for custody immediately? Why wait 8 months? Why only petition for modification after your husband's creditors started pressing? Eliza turned to the judge. Charlotte has nightmares about being taken away. She's terrified of her mother, not because we've turned her against Victoria, but because that little girl knows, deep in her bones, that her mother doesn't actually want her. She wants access to money, and she's willing to traumatize her daughter to get it. Mrs. Hale, you need to sit down, the judge said, but not unkindly. I will. But first I need you to understand something. Charlotte is thriving. She's happy. She's finally starting to believe the world is safe. And if you send her back to a mother who sees her as a financial asset instead of a person, you'll destroy her. Is that really what justice looks like? Eliza sat down. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. The judge looked at Victoria. Mrs. Harrison, I'm going to ask you directly. Are these allegations about your husband's debts true? Victoria's composure cracked. Yes, but that doesn't mean— And did you discuss using Charlotte's trust fund to settle those debts? We discussed options, but we love Charlotte. We want what's best for her, or what's best for your financial situation. The judge's voice was sharp. Because from where I'm sitting, this petition looks less like a mother seeking custody and more like a creditor seeking assets. That's not fair, Victoria whispered. Neither is using a child as a pawn. The judge looked at his notes. I've heard enough. This petition for modification is denied. Custody remains with the Duke and Duchess of Ashenhurst. Furthermore, supervised visitation will be reduced to quarterly instead of monthly, and only if Charlotte herself agrees to see her mother. Your Honor, please, Victoria's lawyer tried. My decision is final. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Eliza couldn't breathe, couldn't process what had just happened. They'd won. Again. But more than that, Victoria's desperation had exposed her. The truth had come out in ways even Dominic's lawyers couldn't have engineered. We should go, Dominic said quietly, his hand finding Eliza's elbow. They left the courtroom. Behind them, Victoria was arguing with her lawyer and her husband, her voice rising in panicked anger. None of it mattered anymore. In the carriage, Dominic exhaled slowly. That was incredibly reckless, he said. I know. You could have destroyed our case, made things worse. I know that too. And you did it anyway. She was lying. Someone had to call her on it. Dominic looked at her, expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not the careful, controlled expression he usually wore. A real smile. I'm starting to think I married someone actually dangerous, he said. Good. Maybe people will stop underestimating me. They rode home in comfortable silence. When they arrived, Charlotte was waiting in the entrance hall, Miss Pemberton's hand on her shoulder. Well? Charlotte asked, voice small. You're staying here, Eliza said. For good. No more hearings, no more fighting. You're home. Charlotte's face crumpled. She ran forward, throwing herself at Eliza with enough force to nearly knock her over. Dominic caught them both, his arms coming around them in an embrace that felt like it had been years in the making. We're a family, Charlotte said, muffled against Eliza's dress. Right? A real one? Yes, sweetheart, Dominic said quietly. A real one. News of the hearing spread quickly. By the next day, everyone in society knew that Victoria's petition had been denied. More importantly, they knew why. The financial motivations, the husband's debts, the way Charlotte had been used as a pawn, all of it became the latest scandal. Lady Ashford sent a note of congratulation that was surprisingly genuine. Catherine Winters appeared at the house with champagne and wicked commentary about Victoria's humiliation. She's ruined, Catherine said, sprawled across the sofa in Eliza's sitting room. Absolutely ruined. No one will receive her now, not after it came out that she was trying to raid her daughter's trust fund. I almost feel sorry for her, Eliza said. Don't. She made her choices. Now she gets to live with them. Catherine raised her glass. To you, Duchess, for being brave enough to speak truth in a room full of lies. It was reckless. It was brilliant. And it worked. That's what matters. After Catherine left, Eliza found Dominic in the library. He was standing by the window, watching the grounds in the fading afternoon light. You're thinking, she said. I'm always thinking. About what this time? He turned. About how we got here. About the night I offered you that insane bargain in the garden. About how impossibly unlikely it was that any of this would work. Are you regretting it? No, the opposite, actually. He crossed to her, stopping close enough that she could see the exhaustion and relief warring in his expression. I told you once that I don't lose. But I was wrong. I've lost plenty, my brother, my family's peace, years to anger and isolation. I was losing long before I met you. And now? Now I'm winning. Not because of the custody decision. Because of this. Us, Charlotte laughing instead of hiding, coming home to people instead of an empty house. He paused. You changed everything, Eliza. I need you to know that. You changed everything, too. You gave me a reason to be brave. You were always brave. You just needed a place to show it. Eliza reached for his hand. He took it, his fingers warm and steady. What happens now? She asked. Now we live. Actually live, instead of just surviving. He smiled slightly. Think you can handle that? With you. I think I can handle anything. 6 months later, Ashenhurst looked different, warmer somehow. The curtains were open more often. Flowers appeared in vases that had sat empty for years. Laughter echoed through halls that had known too much silence. Charlotte was 7 now, taller and more confident. She'd started asking to invite friends to visit, something she'd never had the courage to do before. The house that had felt like a mausoleum was slowly becoming a home. Eliza stood in the gardens one afternoon, watching Charlotte and 2 girls from the neighboring estate chase each other across the lawn. Miss Pemberton supervised from a bench, smiling at their antics. She's happy, Dominic said, appearing beside her. She is. Finally. So are you, I can tell. Eliza glanced at him. How? You don't look like you're bracing for disaster anymore. You look like you belong here. I do belong here. Took me a while to believe it, but I do. They stood together, watching Charlotte play. After a moment, Dominic took Eliza's hand. I love you, he said quietly. I should have said it before. Should have said it months ago, but I'm saying it now. Eliza's breath caught. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. You deserve to hear it. He turned to face her fully. I love you. Not because you helped me keep Charlotte. Not because you're a duchess or because we're legally bound. I love you because you're brave and stubborn and you speak truth even when it's dangerous. Because you made this cold house warm. Because you looked at me, really looked, and decided I was worth staying for. Tears burned behind Eliza's eyes. I love you too. Have for a while now. I know. I'm not good at recognizing these things, but even I couldn't miss that. He smiled. Took me longer to accept I felt the same way, but I do, and I thought you should know. Eliza kissed him, right there in the garden, with Charlotte playing nearby and staff probably watching from windows. It wasn't practiced or perfect. It was real. When they pulled apart, Charlotte was standing a few feet away, grinning. "You kissed," she announced gleefully. "Sarah and Emma. Did you see? They kissed." "We did," Eliza confirmed, trying not to laugh. "Does that mean you're married for real now? Not just pretend?" "We were always married for real, sweetheart," Dominic said. "We're just better at it now." Charlotte considered this. "Good, because I like it better when people are good at things." She ran back to her friends, leaving Eliza and Dominic alone again. "Out of the mouths of children," Eliza murmured. "She's not wrong. We are better at this now. Much better." The year's anniversary of their wedding came quietly. No grand celebration, just dinner together, and Charlotte presenting them with a drawing she'd made. The three of them standing in front of Ashenhurst, all holding hands. "It's our family," she explained. "Miss Pemberton helped with the house part because I'm not good at drawing buildings yet. But I did the people myself." "It's perfect," Eliza said, voice thick. "Can we hang it in the library so everyone can see?" "Absolutely." They hung it over the mantel, displacing a portrait of some disapproving ancestor. Charlotte stood back, admiring her work with satisfaction. "Now it really looks like home," she declared. She was right. The library, the house, all of it felt different now. Lived in, loved. That night, after Charlotte was asleep, Eliza and Dominic sat together in the same library, watching firelight play across Charlotte's drawing. "Do you ever think about that night in the garden?" Eliza asked. "About how close I came to not showing up?" "Constantly. I have nightmares about it sometimes." "Really?" "Really. In them, you don't come. I lose Charlotte. Ashenhurst stays cold forever, and I die alone and miserable exactly as I deserved." "That's dark." "It's honest." He pulled her closer. "But then I wake up, and you're here. Charlotte's here. The house is warm, and I remember that sometimes the impossible happens. We weren't impossible, we were just unlikely. Same thing. Not quite. Unlikely things happen all the time. We just have to be brave enough to choose them." Dominic kissed her forehead. "Thank you." "For what?" "For being brave enough to choose this. To choose me. To choose Charlotte." He paused. "To choose us." "Always," Eliza said. "I'll always choose us." 2 years later, Ashenhurst had been transformed completely. The cold estate that had once felt like a prison now hosted parties that were actually enjoyable. Charlotte was 9, confident and bright, with friends and interests and a future that looked nothing like the scared child who'd cried in the courtroom. Eliza had found her place in society, not as the desperate girl who'd married for survival, but as a duchess who commanded respect through honesty and strength. Catherine Winters remained a close friend, dragging Eliza into various social causes that needed someone willing to speak uncomfortable truths. Dominic had softened. Not completely, he'd never be warm in the traditional sense, but enough that people no longer whispered about his ruthlessness. He smiled more, laughed occasionally, had built something with Eliza that looked remarkably like happiness. Victoria had remarried again, some minor lord desperate enough for money that he'd overlook her reputation. She'd moved to the continent, far from England and the scandal. Charlotte received birthday cards sometimes, perfunctory and signed only Mother. They went in a box in Charlotte's room, acknowledged but not treasured. "Do you think she ever regrets it?" Charlotte asked one day, holding that year's card. "Giving me up?" "Probably," Eliza said honestly. "But regret doesn't change the choices she made. You're here. You're loved. That's what matters." "I know. I just wonder sometimes." "That's normal. Wondering is okay." Charlotte nodded, putting the card in the box with the others. Then she went back to her books, the moment passing without weight. On the 3rd anniversary of their wedding, Dominic surprised Eliza with something unexpected. A trip. Just the two of them, leaving Charlotte in Miss Pemberton's capable care. "Where are we going?" Eliza asked as the carriage rolled away from Ashenhurst. "Somewhere we can be anonymous. No duchess, no duke, just us." They went to a small coastal town, stayed in a modest inn, walked on beaches where no one knew their names. For 3 days, they were just Dominic and Eliza. No titles, no responsibilities, no past to escape or future to worry about. On the last night, walking along the shore as sunset painted the sky impossible colors, Dominic stopped. "I want to tell you something," he said. "All right?" "When my brother died, I thought my life was over. Not literally, but over in any way that mattered. I thought I'd spend the rest of my days managing the estate, raising Charlotte if I could keep her, and dying alone. I'd made peace with that, accepted it as my future. And then? And then you showed up in that garden, desperate and brave and completely inappropriate for what I needed. And you changed everything." He took her hands. "You made me remember what it felt like to want something beyond survival, to hope for more than just getting through each day. You made me human again, Eliza, and I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for that." Eliza's throat tightened. "You did the same for me. Gave me a reason to be more than invisible, to believe I was worth something. You were always worth something. The world just hadn't figured it out yet." They stood there as the sun finished setting, two people who'd started as strangers making a strategic bargain and somehow found their way to love. When they returned to Ashenhurst, Charlotte ran out to meet them, full of stories about everything she'd done while they were gone. "Miss Pemberton let me reorganize the library," she announced proudly, "and I started a new project. Want to see?" She dragged them inside to her room where papers covered every surface. Lists, drawings, notes written in her careful hand. "What is all this?" Eliza asked. "I'm planning," Charlotte said, "for when I'm grown up. All the places I want to see, the things I want to do, the person I want to be." She pointed to one list. "These are the countries I want to visit. And these are the things I want to learn. And this," she held up a drawing, "is what I think I might want my house to look like someday." Eliza looked at the drawing. It wasn't Ashenhurst. It was something new, something all Charlotte's own. "It's wonderful," she said. "Do you think it's silly, planning so far ahead?" "Not at all. Planning means you believe in your future. That's never silly." Charlotte beamed. "Good, because I have a lot of plans." She returned to her papers, already lost in her imagined future. Dominic and Eliza stood in the doorway, watching. "She's going to leave someday," Dominic said quietly. "Grow up. Build her own life." "I know. That's going to hurt." "Yes, but it's what we're raising her to do. Be strong enough to leave, confident enough to build her own future. Doesn't mean I have to like it." Eliza took his hand. "We'll survive it. Together. Same way we've survived everything else." Years passed. Charlotte did grow up, exactly as threatened. She traveled, studied, built a life that was wholly her own. She came home for holidays, bringing stories and friends, and eventually a young man who made her laugh. Ashenhurst filled with life in ways it never had before. Grandchildren arrived, Charlotte's first, then more. The house that had once been cold and silent became warm with voices and chaos and love. Eliza and Dominic grew old together. Not gracefully. They argued and made mistakes and were never quite as proper as society expected. But they grew old together, which was all that mattered. On their 20th anniversary, they stood in the same garden where they'd made their bargain 2 decades earlier. "Do you ever regret it?" Eliza asked. "That night, asking me to marry you." "Never. Not once." Dominic looked at her, gray now visible in his dark hair, lines around his eyes from years of smiling more than he'd ever planned. "Do you regret saying yes?" "Not even a little." She leaned against him, comfortable in a way she'd never imagined being with anyone. "We built something good, didn't we? Out of nothing but desperation and a reckless choice. We built something extraordinary. Family, home, love." He paused. "A life worth living." "Yes," Eliza agreed. "We did that." Charlotte found them there later, her own children in tow. "Mother, Father, are you coming? Dinner's nearly ready and the children are getting hungry." "Coming," Eliza called. But she took one more moment, standing in the garden with the man who'd crossed a ballroom and changed her entire life. The Duke who'd needed a strategic wife and found a partner instead. The person who'd made her brave enough to choose the impossible. "Thank you," Dominic said quietly. "For what?" "For showing up, that night in the garden, for choosing to be brave. Thank you for giving me something worth being brave for." They walked back toward the house together, toward the family waiting inside, toward the life they'd built from nothing but a desperate bargain and the courage to believe in impossible things. Behind them, the garden settled into twilight. The same garden where a scared young woman had once made a choice that would change everything. The same garden where two strangers had become family. The same garden that had witnessed the beginning of something that should never have worked, but somehow became unbreakable. Inside Ashenhurst, warm now, filled with laughter and love and the sound of grandchildren playing, dinner waited. Family waited. A future that neither Eliza nor Dominic could have imagined all those years ago. But they'd found it anyway, together. And that made all the difference.